this morning and aligns with the global priorities of the United Nations and the global agenda. So I'd like to begin my interventions this morning with the topic of education. I'm from Sri Lanka, and 19 years of my 26-year-old life, I grew up during the war. So growing up in a wartime and growing up in a country affected by conflict, we were always told to study hard. That studying hard was the best investment that we could make in our future. So everything I have achieved to this stage in my life, I mostly owe to education and my teachers. That is why I am a strong believer that education should not be a privilege, that education is a birthright, a right of every young man, every young woman, every person born to this world. It is something that is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So every girl and every boy should have the right to education so that they can live a prepared life, including in economic opportunities and even the health outcomes. But not everybody is lucky, as those of you and me who have access to quality education. And I have witnessed this in my travels to the field, from Iraq to West Africa to Palestine to Bangladesh. An estimated 262 million young people between the ages of 6 and 17 are out of school. Some young people miss out on education because of lack of access, some due to lack of infrastructure, some due to bullying and violence in schools, and some, especially girls, due to lack of sanitation facilities in schools. Around 61 million young people miss out on education because they live in conflict and disaster-affected schools. If you look at all these causes that I listed above, that prevent children and young people from receiving a quality education, this all can be prevented and this all can be averted. But the failure to do so have made education a privilege that many do not have today. Studies show that $1 invested in education can generate up to $15 in economic gain. If all students in low-income countries learned basic reading skills, more than 170 million people could be lifted out of poverty. Education is an essential investment to build the future we want that is outlined in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Education is also a powerful weapon to fight security threats, including the rise of violent extremism and radicalism. We know this, and the terrorists know this too, and that is why they keep attacking schools, like in Nigeria, in Kenya, and in Pakistan, and even in the United States. They know that educating a girl is educating an entire generation, and this is why they target especially girls with books, like Malala and her friends, and the schoolgirls from Chibok, Nigeria. So these are the outline of the many issues that young people all around the world face when it comes to accessing quality education. And I hope that our discussions today at the Doha Youth Forum will shed some light on the solutions as we young people can offer to resolve some of these pressing challenges of our time. The second topic of discussion in our event today is climate crisis. We cannot treat the climate crisis like an issue that needs debate. It is not an opinion, it is a scientific fact. In fact, it is an emergency that needs to be tackled urgently. The poor and the marginalized communities suffering from the adverse impacts of climate change, especially in the Sahel, in the Pacific Islands, in the Caribbean islands, are not the ones who were responsible for the massive carbon emissions that is causing global warming. 71% of the global greenhouse gas emissions today are caused by only 100 companies. So these companies and these corporations need to transform their business models into sustainable ones if we are to see the agreement of the Paris Agreement come into life and for all of us to have a livable planet. Climate education is key for this too. The Article 12 of the Paris Agreement calls for climate education, but still in many parts of the world that is not implemented and information about climate change is not available for students. This needs to change. Conversations like today in this forum on climate change can be the starting point for that change. This September, during the United Nations General Assembly, my office convened the first ever Youth Climate Action Summit in New York. Alongside the world leaders, more than 1,000 young people came to New York from all parts of the world, calling for urgent climate action from their leaders. It was an incredible moment of solidarity where young climate activists from Latin America to Africa to Asia to the Middle East came together and demanded the same thing in one voice: urgent action. Young people are changing the way they live their lives, the way they travel, the way they recycle, what they eat, what they wear, and how they organize movements. At an individual level, we are a generation who are extremely conscious of the decisions that we are making as consumers and as voters. Individual change is great, but that is not enough. We need to change systems, especially our economic and political systems that put profit over people and planet, feeding on unfair globalization. From what I've seen in my engagement in this topic, until that change is brought about, young people who are protesting on the streets will protest every Friday. Indigenous people defending their native lands will continue to fight for their rights. Activists will continue to push governments, the fossil fuel industry, and the big corporations until they align with the targets of the Paris Agreement. I hope that all of you will be a part of that movement, the movement that will define the fate of our generation and the generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Up next, we have opening remarks from Ms. Mazoun Limlehan, the activist, refugee, and youngest Goodwill Ambassador to UNICEF. We're delighted to have her here with us today.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'm so proud to be here with all of you, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks a lot for being here today and also for this amazing opportunity for me as a young person to be here to represent my voice, but of course not only my own voice but the voice of millions and millions of children out there who are voiceless and cannot be here with you to talk about their own challenges and about their own problems. Of course, I would like to start my talk about the importance of education, but also to focus on the importance of our identity, as well as the importance of having our identity and also having our education. As you all know, identity is something identifies us, it makes us unique, and it makes us different. But of course, not different in a negative way, but a different in a sense where we can share our values and our norms with others and teach them, and we learn from them too. Once we have different identities, we can really enrich our societies and we enrich our world basically. So once we have that identity, we can have ourselves, and that's my own thought about that. But of course, as we all know, identity is sometimes at risk, because once we have conflict, once we have challenges, our identity suffers. And sometimes we are at risk to lose that identity, and we cannot protect that identity. So through my own experience as a Syrian refugee, and I remember when I had to flee my homeland in Syria when the war started in 2013, when I left my homeland and lived in refugee camps. The thing that I was thinking about, it was my own education. Of course, when we talk about education, we must talk about identity, because education is connected to identity through giving us opportunities and through giving us the strength. So the thing which gives me strength to protect my identity, to represent my identity, is my own education, because my education is my strength and what gives me the power to identify my identity, basically. So I was thinking about education, if I could really have an opportunity to go to school and learn. And I didn't know anything about the camps. But once I arrived to Jordan and lived in Za'atari camp first, I just was asking about the school. So when I found the school, really that moment has changed my life. It is the time when I realized by education I can make a difference. And by education I can prove to everyone I am strong enough to be myself and to fight for my rights. Because being a refugee, it is not my fault. It is not something I wanted. And also, being a refugee, it is something not shameful. It is something you have chosen to have a better life and to have a future. So refugees didn't choose to suffer. So as long as they didn't choose to suffer, they deserve to go to school. They deserve to learn. They deserve to protect their identity and to have their identity. Of course, going to Jordan wasn't a big difference, because Jordan and Syria like one country, and my Arab world is like one country. We have the same identity, and I'm so proud of my Arabic identity, basically. Being an Arab person, being a Muslim person, this makes me so proud. And for me, if it makes me so proud, I must teach others about it, because it is something positive to have different identities, basically, as I mentioned before. And the difference that I had, and when I started to think, okay, my identity is challenging now, is living in the UK. So once you live in a different country, completely different country from where you have come from, basically, it is, I don't want to say like the UK is not a good place. Of course, it is a good place, and I am so thankful to the UK and to all countries who welcome refugees. But at the same time, the lifestyle is different, the language is different, my culture is different. So here where I started to realize the difference, and I started to realize how it is hard sometimes really to keep on our identity. And then I thought education is the way to keep myself aware about my own identity, and to keep others aware about who I am. Because to be honest, we must be proud of who we are. If I go to a different place, this doesn't mean I must change myself or change my identity. But on the other hand, I must share my identity. Sharing our identity in a positive way, it is the greatest way to keep on our identity. And I believe education and through awareness, it is the way to show the reality of who you are and to give a positive picture about your identity, of course. So in the UK, I started to share all my values and my norms, and to let many people who sometimes misunderstand us and who don't know about us, basically. And I realized the biggest problem in terms of sharing the identities between all people around the world through my traveling and my activism work, and through what I do as a goodwill ambassador when I go and witness the challenges many people face around the world. I feel that something which is really missing, it is knowing about others. So sometimes if I am not aware about a specific society, if I am not aware about a specific country, if I don't know, then it is a big problem indeed, because knowing is your the first step you have to do to give to others and to change in this world. Because if I don't know about the problems children face in Mali, where I have been recently, for example, children who, because of conflict, they cannot go to school, they cannot learn, they are so determined and they are so hopeful about who they are, about their future. They they really need education. I have met so many young people who work as journalists just to give their voice and to show people they are strong, just they need an opportunity. I feel if we don't know about them, then we cannot help them. So, like I am here today in this Doha forum, which is an amazing indeed opportunity for us as a young person, me as a young person, to talk about their challenges. And then, of course, it is not only my responsibility, it is the responsibility of all of us. So to make a positive world, to make a peaceful world, we need the voices of all, not only young people, but also to all of you. And of course, I'm so thankful to all of you to be here with us, to listen to me and to listen the voice which represents the voices of millions. And of course, we don't want to forget the family when we talk about identity. As I know, since I was young person, first thing I learned, it started with my family. Let's give an example about religion. So, for example, religion, we don't learn it at the school because education is not only limited on schools. So, being at the school, it comes in the secondary socialization, basically. But the first socialization, it is our families. Once our families, they have positive awareness, once they teach us the reality of our values, where they teach us our correct religion, the teachings which exist in the religion in a correct way, it is where we can have our identity and we can use that identity in a positive way. So if I have given an example of religion because protecting identity is not limited to education. So if the family can teach in a positive way, it is the beginning of having a great identity. And that's the way to protect identity in societies where they are minorities. For example, like myself living in the UK, I keep my identity through actually being with my family. My family teaches me my identity and also keep my identity. And to be honest, the biggest example on this, when we go to Europe, we see all the communities, which is small communities, they still hold on their origin and they didn't forget themselves. Because as I said before, identity, it identifies us and it makes us unique. We cannot give up on our identity, and that's we are here today to remind everyone we must protect that identity and don't give up on it, because it is something from me. I cannot give up on it if I change my place or where I live. And I believe education is the amazing way to do that. And young people have proven they are not only suffering, but also they are part of the solutions. So our voices must be heard, and we must make a positive difference. So we start today by talking, but I really hope, and of course I have a great hope in all of you to transform these words into actions, because we are here to make actions on the ground to improve the lives of millions and millions of children out there who need our help, and they are waiting all of you to help them and to give them an opportunity and to change their life, because they indeed deserve, and especially children, because the children in general, they have been seen as victims, and they deserve to be heroes, not only victims. So for me, for example, if I didn't have education, if I didn't have an opportunity, I cannot be here with you today. So thanks a lot, and I hope you enjoy this event, and thanks a lot. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you so much, Mazoon. And now we finish our opening remarks with His Excellency Salah bin Ghanem Al Ali, Minister of Culture and Sports. His Excellency, in his capacity as a minister, continuously works to empower and support Qatari youth. Your Excellency, we're honored to have you. Please join us on stage.
صباح الخير أجمعين. سعادة الشيخ هند بنت حمد، أصحاب السعادة، السادة الضيوف، الأخوان والأخوات، الأبناء والبنات، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. في هذا المنتدى الهام أنا سعيد جدا أن أكون بينكم. لا شك القضايا المطروحة فيه قضايا في غاية الأهمية. المنتدى يتحدث بعناوين عريضة عن التعليم، التغير المناخي، التطرف، وكذلك يتعرض إلى الهوية، فمواضيع في غاية الأهمية. أنا إذا كان لي مشاركة اليوم فأحب أني أبتدي بمرحلة الشباب قبل تقريبا 25 سنة. طبعا شاب مثلي مثل يعني كل الشباب، كان دائما عندنا طموح ورغبة في تغيير هذا العالم. ماذا حدث لهذا الطموح؟ هذا اليوم إن شاء الله أنا بحاول أتكلم معاكم فيه وأشارك معاكم بعض القناعات اللي أنا توصلت لها. قناعات أعتقد أنها صحيحة، لكن لا شك أن هناك في احتمال أنها تكون خطأ. فيعني أنتم في حرية في قراراتكم للاقتناع بالكلام اللي أقوله، أو أن أنتم أيضا تحددون قناعاتكم. للإجابة على هذا السؤال في الحقيقة يعني في سؤالين مهمين احنا لازم نطرحهم على أساس احنا نحدد ما هي الآليات اللي تعطينا الفرصة ان احنا نحدث تغيير حقيقي في مجتمعاتنا. لا شك ان المنتديات مهمة، لا شك ان اللقاءات مهمة، لا شك ان المؤسسات مهمة، من ضمنها الأمم المتحدة ومؤسساتها المختلفة، اليونسكو وغيرها، وكذلك المؤسسات المحلية من وزارات وهيئات ومؤسسات. لا شك أن دورها يعني هذه المؤسسات في غاية الأهمية، لكن لا ننسى أن هذه المؤسسات تعمل الآن من عقود. نسأل أنفسنا سؤال بسيط. الأمم المتحدة، وأنا ما أتكلم هنا كسياسي، أتكلم مثل ما وعدتكم كإنسان كنت قبل 25 سنة شاب، واليوم تولدت عندي قناعات معينة حاب أني أشارككم فيها لعل أنها تعم الفائدة. الأمم المتحدة اليوم احنا الحروب اللي ما نسمع عنها أكثر من الحروب اللي تسمعون عنها ترى. يعني الإعلام يغطي بعض الحروب، لكن هناك حروب أكثر وأكثر احنا ما نسمع عنها. كذلك قضايا العنصرية ما زالت حية ونشطة في معظم المجتمعات، حتى المجتمعات المتقدمة. وقضايا كثيرة تهم الإنسان اليوم احنا نعاني منها، الحريات إلى آخره. إذا ماذا يحصل إذا احنا عندنا هالمنتديات وعندنا هالمؤسسات اللي تعمل فيها تشارك فيها دول؟ إيش الحاصل؟ وليش ما قدرنا أن احنا نحقق اختراق في البارادايمز الموجودة في هذه المجتمعات الإنسانية كلها بدون تمييز؟ أنا أعتقد للإجابة على هذا السؤال، واللي أنا هذه قناعتي يعني شخصية اللي وصلت لها بعد 25 أو 30 سنة، أن إحنا أول سؤال لازم نسأل أنفسنا، إحنا وين لازم نبتدي أصلا؟ يعني البداية وين لازم تكون؟ إحنا على أساس نكون نعمل تغيير حقيقي وبارادايم شيفت في هذه المجتمعات، إحنا وين لازم نبتدي؟ هذا السؤال المهم. هل إحنا نبتدي إن إحنا ننشئ مؤسسات جديدة، ننشئ برامج جديدة، نغير خططنا الاستراتيجية وأهدافنا؟ وين ممكن يكون البداية؟ هل الخطأ في المسؤولين؟ ما هي تبدلت في هالعقود اللي راحت تبدلوا مسؤولين كثير، ما صار اختراق على المستوى المطلوب. وين ممكن تكون البداية؟ البداية قد يعني بعضكم يعني يتساهل الموضوع أو يستغرب، لكن بعد أنا أتوقع بعد 25 سنة بتقتنعون بنفس الكلام اللي أقول لكم. البداية يجب أن تكون من أنفسنا، والقاعدة تقول إذا أردت أن تغير العالم فابدأ بنفسك. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. أولما أصابتكم مصيبة قلتم أن هذا، قل هو من عند أنفسكم. فأنا لما أتكلم عن بارادايم شيفت أو تغيير حقيقي في التصورات الكبرى للمجتمعات، أنا أتكلم عني وعنك وعن كل واحد فيكم. كل واحد فينا ينظر نفسه وغير من نفسه. طبعا في ناس واجد ممكن تدخل معي في ديبيت في هذا الموضوع، ودخلت في ديبيت كثير في هذا الموضوع، لكن أنا أحب أذكركم أن التغييرات العظمى اللي صارت في التاريخ كلها بدأت من أفراد، ما بدأت من مؤسسات. بل بالعكس، المؤسسات كانت دائما عائق في وجه التغيير الحقيقي والشفت الحقيقي. ولكم في الأنبياء، جميع الأنبياء وجميع المصلحين، من موسى وعيسى عليه السلام، محمد، إلى مانديلا وغيره من المصلحين، ومارتن لوثر كينج. فالتغيير فعلا يبدأ من أنفسنا، كل واحد فينا لازم يراجع نفسه. وهذا بيطرح السؤال الثاني. طبعا ممكن شخص يقول يعني معقولة أنا أغير نفسي، أغير العالم؟ يعني الحمد لله الآن العلم توصل إلى البترفلاي إفكت، أنه ممكن حدث بسيط، مجرد كف في أقصى تونس لشخص شاب صغير، يحدث الثورات العربية هذه كلها اللي تشوفونها، والتحولات الكبرى اللي قاعدة تصير، واللي ترى احنا ما زلنا في بدايتها. يعني احنا ما زلنا يعني ما زالت الورود لم تتفتح في الربيع العربي، وإن شاء الله أنها جاية يوم تتفتح إن شاء الله. فممكن، وأنا أتمنى منكم أيضا الاطلاع على تجربة أو الكونكورد. تذكرون آخر رحلة الكونكورد اللي في فرنسا سقطت؟ أرجوكم ادرسوا أسباب سقوط الطيارة، تكتشفون البترفلاي إفكت يعني حقيقي. مجرد مهندس شاب صغير وضع مسمار بالخطأ في طيارة في أمريكا تسببت في سقوط الكونكورد وإيقاف هذا النوع من الكوميونيكيشن أو قصدي الترانسبورت في العالم. لا تستهين بنفسك. بنجامين فرانكلين، واحد من المؤسسين، الآباء المؤسسين في أمريكا، كان أديب وفيلسوف، له كلمة ممتازة، يعني قصيدة، فيقول يعني for one to fail the shoe was lost. أنا ما راح أدخل في التفاصيل لأن يعني الوقت صراحة ما يسعفنا، لكن أتمنى أنكم تدخلون وتقرون القصيدة. يعني هي اختصارها أن بسبب مسمار حذوة الحصان سقطت المملكة. فأرجوكم يعني تشوفون هذه. فمهم جدا في محاولة تغيير أي بارادايم في أي مجتمع، وإحنا اليوم نتكلم كالمجتمع الإنساني، إحنا محتاجين أول حاجة أن إحنا ننظر لأنفسنا. هذا السؤال الأول. إذا البداية يجب أن تكون من أنفسنا. السؤال الثاني، زين بنبتدي من أنفسنا، بس كيف نبتدي؟ كيف تكون البداية؟ يعني في ناس يقول لك والله إحنا خلنا ناخذ شهادة من الجامعة، وهذا شيء ممتاز وجيد. واحد يقول لك والله خلنا ناخذ ليدرشيب يعني بروجرامز، وهذا شيء أيضا ممتاز. لكن أنا أعتقد أن الموضوع أعمق بكثير من هذا. كثير من الدول اللي تملك يعني أو مواطنين يحملون PhD كبير وشهادات وكتاب ونخب ومفكرين سقطت في أول اختبار في قضايا الحرب الأهلية يعني والمذاهب وقتال المذاهب والأديان. سقطت في أول اختبار لها، مع أن الجامعات كانت موجودة إلى آخره. ما نقلل من أهمية الجامعات والتعليم والمؤسسات التعليمية، لكن أنا أعتقد أن في شيء قبل ذلك يجب أن يهيأ. أنا بس أساس أوضح النقطة القادمة اللي هي وين نبتدي، اللي هي التصورات الكبرى للمجتمع. أنا صراحة كنت حاب أني أعرض عليكم يعني بعض المودلز، لكن ما أعتقد أنه كان مناسب في هذا الوقت. لكن تقدرون تتخيلون معي مثلا الآيسبرغ، الجبل الجليدي، وهو نموذج ممتاز في تحليل، وهذا نموذج جديد اسمه الآيسبرغ موديل. أرجو أيضا أنكم تطلعون عليه تستفيدون منه، لأن هذا ممكن تطبقه أنت في قضايا كثيرة، وتجد أنه يساعدك في تحليل كثير من الظواهر والمؤسسات والمشاريع إلى آخره. بكل بساطة، وأنا يعني هو يعني في تعقيدات، لكن بكل بساطة هو يتكلم عن الجبل الجليدي. دائما احنا نشوف منه الظاهر، وهو يشكل 8% إلى 10%. لكن اللي ما نشوفه في الجبل الجليدي هو 90% من الجبل اللي هو تحت الماء. وهذه هي التصورات الكبرى للمجتمع. احنا ترى الظواهر والفعاليات ممكن تشتريها الأموال اللي هي 10%. ممكن نشتري مظاهر التغير والشفت من جامعات، من مؤسسات، من انفراستراكشر، من منتديات إلى آخره. لكن علينا نحذر وننتبه للعمق الجبل الجليدي اللي هو في حقيقته يمثل تصورات الإنسان. ما هي تصورات الإنسان؟ يجب أن نختبر إحنا تصوراتنا كبشر في كل مجتمع، ولا يخلو مجتمع من نقصان في تصوراته، لأن التصورات اللي هي عمق الجبل الجليدي هي اللي تحدد قيمك، هي اللي تحدد عاداتك، هي اللي تحدد أعرافك، وبالتالي يظهر على السطح سلوك الناس. فقضية التصورات، علماء الاجتماع يتكلمون عن 8 تصورات كبرى. طبعا ما في وقت ان احنا نتكلم عن 8 تصورات كبرى، وارجو ان شاء الله السنة الجاية اذا كان في نسخة ثانية لمنتدى الشباب ان تعطونا فرصة نكون يعني باذن الله من ضمن الناس اللي ممكن نتكلم ويصير حوار مفتوح. انا ما راح اتعرض لل8 تصورات الكبرى، لكن انا راح اتكلم عن 3 تصورات واللي هي تقريبا لها علاقة بمنتدانا. يعني التصور الأول للإنسان اللي هو تصورنا للكرامة الإنسانية. هذا السؤال الأول، اختبر نفسك، ما هي الكرامة الإنسانية؟ ما هو تصورك عن الكرامة الإنسانية؟ والكرامة الإنسانية تقوم على ساقين على أساس نكون أكثر تحديدا. تقوم على العدالة وتقوم على الحرية، أو بالأحرى تقوم على الحرية وتقوم على العدالة. دائما الحرية أنا بالنسبة لي مقدمة. وأنا أرجع وأقول لكم لما أتكلم عن الحرية في مستوى التصورات، لا تفكرون في المؤسسات القضائية، فكروا في أنفسكم. أنت ما هو تصور الحرية بالنسبة لك؟ كيف تنظر إلى الحرية؟ أنا بالنسبة لي والقناعة اللي وصلت لها بعد وعمري الآن تجاوز 50 سنة، أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، لا إكراه في الدين، قد تبين الرشد من الغي. في أعظم قضية للإنسان وأعظم تصور، قضية الإيمان وقضية التوحيد، وآيات كثيرة أنت تكره الناس على أن يكونوا مؤمنين. في هذه القضايا الأساسية الله سبحانه وتعالى أعطاك الحرية. فيجيك إنسان يحدد حرياتك في قضايا أقل من هذه بكثير. وإحنا كلنا كأفراد ما نخلو من ذلك. أنت تبي ولدك يدرس اللي أنت بيه، تبي يلبس اللي أنت بيه، خاصة هو طفل، فيظهر الولد امتداد لك، لكن مش امتداد حق وجدانه وحق وعيه. هذه تسبب مشاكل كبيرة. يطلع عندنا ناس عندهم حملة PhD وعلماء، لكن ممكن يكونون في نفس الوقت نرجسيين ويشتغلون على جراحين، ممكن يشتغلون في نقل الأعضاء بطريقة غير قانونية من أطفال. تخيل. فتصورنا للحرية يجب أن كل واحد فينا يراجع نفسه وتصوراته للحرية، بغض النظر عن أنت في مرحلة الشباب شو اللي سمعته من البيت، شو اللي سمعته من المدرسة، شو اللي سمعته من محيطك، من ثقافتك. عليك أنك تراجع نفسك، لأن الحرية لها علاقة مباشرة بكرامة الإنسان. الإنسان مهما أعطيته، إذا ما أعطيته حرية والله ما يشعر بالسعادة ولا يشعر بكرامته. الساقة الثانية للكرامة الإنسانية هي العدالة. وأنا أرجع وأكرر لكم، أنا ما أتكلم عن مؤسسات العدالة القضائية وغيرها، أنا أتكلم عنك كفرد وتصورك للعدالة. اليوم لما أنت تجي في طريق الناس واقفة والناس كلها مشغولة ورايحة الشغل مثلك، وتجي وتدخل على الناس وتقص عليهم الطريق، هل أنت تستشعر أن أنت قاعد تظلم لك عشرات البشر في الطريق، ولا أنت ما تستشعر هذه؟ حالة الموظفين إذا كنت مسؤول، أما واحد يكلمك تليفون وتخلص معاملته بالواسطة، وعندك 200 واحد أو 300 مواطن وغير مواطن ومقيم لهم معاملات ما أنجزت من شهر من شهرين، هل أنت تستشعر الظلم اللي أنت قاعد تحقق على هالناس؟ المدرس اللي ما يخلص في تدريسه، هل هو عنده تصور أنه هو ظالم؟ هذه إحنا الأشياء اللي لازم نستشعرها في كل شيء. ما عدا ذلك، إذا ما تحققت العدالة، أنا دائما أضرب مثل للناس أقول لهم إذا جاك اليوم موظف عندك وناديت الموظف قلت له يا أخي والله ما شاء الله عليك أنت 90%، وأنا صراحة يعني بعطيك مكافأة 1,000,000 ريال، بعطيك مكافأة، أكيد بيكون سعيد ومستانس. هذا الموظف راح المكتب، جلس مع مدير ثاني في نفس مستواه ونفس تقريبا التقييم، قال له والله أنا الوزير اليوم أكرمني أعطاني 1,000,000 ريال. تخيل، فرحان وكلم أهله ويبشرهم، يكلم أصدقائه، اكتشف أن المدير الثاني أنا معطيه 5,000,000. هنا هو فرحته ب1,000,000 الآن، يعني لكم تخيلون أنها يعني أصبحت، مع أنه هو ما أحد خذ من 1,000,000 شيء، يعني ما له علاقة. لكن الشعور بعدم العدالة يقلب حياة الناس جحيم. والكرامة الإنسانية أنا أعتقد هي السبب الرئيسي في الثورات العربية، العدالة والحرية، مش الخبز ولا العيش ولا العمل ولا الوظيفة. التصور الأول هو تصورنا الكرامة الإنسانية. التصور الثاني أيضا هو تصورنا للعلم والمعرفة. احنا للأسف قزمنا تصورنا للعلم والمعرفة إلى حد متدني جدا. اليوم احنا نتعلم ليش؟ الأبو يبيك تجيب علامات عشان ترفع راسه، أنت بتجيب درجات عشان تحصل لك راتب ووظيفة جيدة، أنت بتدرس على أساس ما تصير وظيفة، عندك وظيفة متدنية، أنت تدرس على أساس تكون جاه، أنت تدرس على أساس تكون عندك شهادة ورقة تعلقها فوق راسك. فبالتالي هذا التصور إيش صنع عندنا؟ صنع علاقة الطفل مع الكتاب علاقة سيئة إلى أبعد الحدود. الطفل حتى اليوم، حتى الجامعي، من يخلص التيرم أول شيء يسويه في حفل الأعياد، كأنه أعياد عندهم، يقدمون الكتب هذه قرابين لفرحتهم بانتهاء التيرم أو بانتهاء السنة الدراسية. هذه العلاقة نتيجة تصورنا احنا للعلم. في حين ان العلم، يقول واحد من علماء الفيزياء في أمريكا، يقول it's not about what we cover in class, it's about what we discover. وين الاكتشاف؟ من فينا يسأل ولده إذا جاء من المدرسة ايش تعلمت اليوم؟ ايش اكتشفت اليوم؟ احنا همنا ان درجات ويحصل درجات. ولذلك يعتقدون ناس كثير ان لما عباقرة المعرفة والعلم واللي أحدثوا بارادايم شفت بالعلم والمعرفة، يقول لك أكثرهم كانوا أصلا دروباوت من السكولز. هم مو دروباوت لأنه كان ضعيف في الجامعة أكاديميا، لأنه عرف أن هذا السيستم أصلا لا يؤدي إلى شيء، وهو عرف قيمة العلم والمعرفة. فإحنا تصورنا عن العلم والمعرفة يجب أن يتغير. الله سبحانه في أول آية نزلت على الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم: اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق، خلق الإنسان من علق، اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم، علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. هو هذا الهدف، انك تكتشف، انك ترضي فضولك. فأتمنى إن شاء الله بإذن الله أن هذا التصور أيضا يتغير. احنا يعني خاصة لدى الشباب. التصور الأخير اللي بتكلم عنه هو تصور مهم له علاقة بالتطرف أيضا، اللي هو تصورنا للآخر، الآخر في اللون، الآخر في العرق، الآخر في الدين، الآخر في الجندر، الآخر في الجنسية. ما هو تصورنا له؟ وش المعلومات اللي احنا حصلناها فبنينا تصوراتنا من خلالها؟ ان جيت للأديان في كل الحضارات، يعني ممكن يقولون لك مسلك معادي، وممكن يقولون لك مسلك مرحب جدا بالآخر. احنا علينا ان هنا انت كشاب عليك ان انت تبني تصوراتك. ما عدا ذلك معالجة الظواهر بظواهر، يعني نحط أجهزة في المطارات ونشدد الأمن ومراجعات وكذا، والله ما راح تحل المشكلة. نعالج الظاهرة بظاهرة. الآي ستيب، نحاول نحرك الجبل الجليدي بالآي ستيب، ما راح يتحرك. فعلينا احنا ننزل إلى التصورات. التصور الآخر يعني صراحة، وحتى يعني موضوع الهوية لازم نكون حذرين فيه. احنا بين تميز الهوية وبين ان احنا نكون منفتحين على الآخر، وهذا حد خطير جدا يجب ان يتعامل معه بكل حكمة. مهاتما غاندي له كلمة حكيمة يقول: no culture can survive by being exclusive. هذه أيضا يعني مش تصور آخر يجب أن احنا ننتبه له. فالآخر الله سبحانه وتعالى يقول: أنا بالنسبة لي هذه يعني ولدت عندي قناعة أن الإنسان بعمله. معايير اللي تعلمناها احنا صغار، الحسب والنسب والأصل والفصل واللون، خلنا نكون واقعيين يا جماعة الخير. ترى يعني ما يسلم إنسان من العنصرية. والله لا يجعلنا إن شاء الله نحط في اختبارات، ولعل في اختبار بسيط انت اذا لف عليك واحد من جنسيه مختلفه او من في اي مكان، ولكم تشوفون على اليوتيوب اما واحد يعني يتعرض لواحد في طريق، تشوفوا السب اللي يكون بناء على جنسيته او على لونه او على اخره. فهنا تظهر تحت الاختبار، يظهر تصورنا الحقيقي للاخر. انا احاول قدر الامكان ان يعني اغير تصوري شخصيا وهو يعني مش شيء سهل أن الإنسان يستطيع يكون يعني مجرد ويعامل الناس بناء على عملهم. الله سبحانه وتعالى يقول يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. إذن هي بالعمل، ما لها علاقة لا لون ولا أصل ولا فصل. هذه أنا على عجالة التصورات الثلاثة. أنا بقول لكم بس عناوين التصورات الأخرى اللي هي تصورنا للبيئة، تصورنا للدين، تصورنا للوقت، تصورنا للعمل. هذه تكمل المناظير أو التصورات الثمانية. أنا آسف على الإطالة، لكن فعلا حبيت أكلمكم من قلبي وأعطيكم تجربتي 25 سنة. أنتوا الآن الشباب خاصة، يعني أنتوا الآن في 25 الأفرج يمكن. بعد 25 سنة بتصلون هالمحطة. أرجو أن تكونوا إن شاء الله أفضل مني في بناء قناعاتكم وتستفيدون من الجميع. شكرا جزيلا وتحياتي.
شكرا. And thank you, Your Excellency. And now we'll hear from some of the voices around Qatar.
2050. I'd be 50.
For me, I'm a kind of a family guy.
Have made enough money at that point to not necessarily have to worry.
Working somewhere in Europe, ideally.
Probably get into business.
Being my own boss.
I don't know yet.
Who knows? Maybe I'll have a family.
Big family.
Yeah, raise a family.
I want to be a mother of 2 kids, 1 boy, 1 girl.
Actually, I have an Instagram page. It has to do with climate change.
I'm vegetarian.
I recycle.
You use the metro instead of your car.
I think it's really important that people start to understand the power that they have as consumers.
You can actually make a change.
That's what I'm working on. I've been lazy, but I think I'll take it off from now.
Please welcome to the stage our first panel, Climate Change, the Power and Responsibility of the Next Generation, moderated by Dareen Abu Ghaida from Al Jazeera English.
We'll share the microphone. If I can get another microphone, please, that would be great. So, good morning, everyone. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, very happy to have you with us here in this panel. As you heard, it's on climate change and the power and responsibility of the next generation. Such a crucial topic, as we all know. So, my name is Dareen Abu Ghaida. I'm from Al Jazeera English, and I'll be with you for, I think we have less than 60 minutes, but we'll try and get in as much as possible in the time allotted. So we've seen this discussion around climate change really take on a new urgency. You're all speaking about it, you're all hearing about it, and what we're going to be looking at with my panelists is the power and responsibility that the young generation have, what they have done, and how they can come up with results. Where should their focus lie? Should it be one, on changing policies when it comes to government? Should it be on changing consumer behavior? Should it be on planning for a warmer planet? Should it be all of the above? Are they exclusive or not? So I hope that we can generate ideas with them from what they have to say that we can all implement, and we can all teach others how to implement as well. I'll just tell you very briefly, before we came into this auditorium, I was speaking to them just outside, and I'm genuinely very excited for you to hear what they have to say. All of them are such pioneers and role models in what they're doing. So I'm going to stop talking in 1 minute, and I'm going to let them talk about their experience. Just before I do that, I'll tell you about the order of play this morning. So they'll each have a couple of minutes to speak on their area of expertise, and then we'll move into the question and session answer. I think now we're a bit tight for time, so what I'll do is I'll open up the floor to you guys right away. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. I'll ask you to please keep them brief so that we can get through as many as possible within the allotted time. So let me introduce my panelists. Mohammad Al Hassan, right here to my left. He's a sustainable energy activist. He's a researcher. He's also participated in the 2012 UN Climate Change Conference here in Doha. And through his work, he aims to contribute to the global effort to tackle climate change through education, through policy, through strategy, and through the development of new technologies. He's worked on and he's developed renewable energy systems and holds a patent in the hybrid solar power field. To his left is Dina Al-Tarawne. She's an avid environmentalist. She's also the co-founder of Green Mangroves. I looked up Green Mangroves online, and the mission is to bring people together to protect oceans, one person, one kayak, and one thought at a time. I love that logo, I really did. So Dina currently works as a biological sciences researcher at Carnegie Mellon University in Qatar. That's where she graduated from this year. And she was also selected as a finalist in the UN Young Champion of the Earth competition for 2019. And let's bring in Abdullah Suwaidi. He's an entrepreneur, and he's the chairman of Elite Paper Recycling. He's been at the forefront of advocating for paper recycling in Qatar to help reduce the effects of climate change. And this year, his company introduced the Green Diplomacy Program, and that's to create public awareness on the environment, climate change, as well as recycling. And he built a recycling factory here in the country. He's also a recipient of the Green Era Award for Sustainability in 2018. So I'll be asking you about the Green Diplomacy Program, what it is, because I think it's absolutely crucial for everyone to find out more on that. Okay, so let's begin with Mohammad. You'll be speaking on the role and importance of education towards addressing climate change. So break that down for us from your experience.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Darin, for introducing me. As Darin said, I'll be talking about the role of education in tackling climate change, tackling global issues. In my belief, there are three main stages where education can play an important role in tackling those issues. The first stage is about understanding the issue, understanding the significance of the issue. If you ask people nowadays about what is climate change really, most of them will say, well, worldwide the temperature is rising, the ice polars are melting, but what does that really mean? If we want people to be involved, to be committed to climate change, they will need to understand how is it related to them. It has to become personal. If we want commitment, they need a personal connection to the issue. Yes, there are general global issues that are caused by climate change. As I say, the ice polars are melting, sea levels are rising, the land areas are decreasing, the severity of the heat waves, droughts. On the opposite side of the scale, hurricanes, category 4 and 5 are increasing, and they will keep increasing in the future. But what does it really mean to them? I believe the first step, we should educate people, and the education should differ between different parts of the world about how is climate change related to them, how is it affecting them directly, and of course, like what can they do to improve upon it, which will take us to the second stage. The second stage will, after understanding the issue, how is it related to them, people will need to understand how can they contribute. A lot of people might underestimate their capabilities to solve the issue. They will say, okay, I didn't study, I don't hold a PhD, I don't hold a master's or even a bachelor in sustainability and sustainable energy. How can I contribute? Well, in reality, everyone can contribute. It doesn't matter what certificate or transcript you hold. It doesn't matter where do you work. It can be very simple, from simple lifestyle changes, turning off the water when you brush your teeth, closing the lights and the AC when you leave the office or your house, to researching new technologies, implementing sustainable energy solutions, and all of that. The third step, the final stage, is in research. Smart people around the world are working hard every day. They are putting a lot of efforts in researching new technologies, developing new ways to tackle climate change. To be honest, it's a very big topic. If we are gonna discuss it, it might take a few hours at least. But I kept it brief, so we leave the rest for questions, and then maybe we'll move on to Dina.
Dina, so Muhammad was rightly correcting out, and I think a lot of people feel the same way, that it can be very overwhelming. There are so many issues when it comes to climate change. How does one person start to change or contribute? So this is something that you've specifically worked on, and the belief is that small changes can make big differences. So tell us how lifestyle changes can combat climate change, and how can we all learn as to how to go about that?
Good morning, first of all, and I'm very honored to be here this morning. And I know our time is tight, so I'll start by sharing some snippets of my life that I hope will inspire. Um, from a very early age, I've always loved to be in nature. I would sneak out to play with stray cats and fondle them. I would go outside my grandmother's forest and collect pine cones. But then I realized that outside someone else's house, forests were burning. Things were happening that were beyond our control. And I think it was hard for me to realize that if we cannot see a catastrophe, how can we act upon it? How can we make action to something that we look outside our window and everything looks fine? So it was then that I realized, and after I think maybe mentioning the various trips I took around beaches in Qatar, that I realized one big problem: plastic. Um, I think that will be my main focus for today, because I think the truth is we're all connected, and there's no magical place called away. When you throw something out in the trash, it goes somewhere. And in the case of plastic, it will live longer than all of us. So I think the core of our problem is that we're always on the hunt for more. A new job, a new degree, new house, everything is, accelerated. We want more. So this will only satisfy us for, as we all know, for just a small period of time. But what I realized later is, in a moment, a very serene moment actually, in a kayak in the mangroves here in Qatar, a very beautiful place, I found my fulfillment. Um, there was this open ocean nearby, trees and flamingos and birds and fish, and it was just so beautiful. And at that moment I realized that the true meaning comes from these small moments in life, and that we should do everything we have to protect it. In 2014, my sister Lena and I co-founded the nonprofit Green Mangroves. So we, like Doreen introduced kindly, we take people on kayaking trip, but we sometimes occasionally do beach cleanups, but our main focus is to spark conversations like this, meaningful talk that will inspire and hopefully get people to make small changes that eventually will lead to big differences. So we know that individual action works, and we know that every person can have a humongous power to change the world. But I think we need to go bigger, to inspire more, to act on policy, to go to governments, to talk to people, and be out there for the world. Thinking about fuel, what we're wearing, anyone who knows me personally, I'm a very minimalistic person. I'm very limited with my wardrobe options, but I think that was maybe a very crucial step for me to realize that sometimes less is more. And this is why I think on my 18th birthday, I decided to adopt a plant-based diet where I don't consume any meat or dairy products. And this was, I think, this was a very important moment for me. It solidified the ideas I had about the power of one. Thinking about one person going, or just reducing their consumption in terms of meat and dairy, and how important that is to lessen the soil eruption, thinking about the abuse that the animals endure, and just in general, and most importantly, the climate change as a result of our actions in animal agriculture and industries. So what can we do as individuals? Of course, you'd hate me if I said go vegan or adopt a plant-based diet, but actions will matter. Things like going to the grocery store and getting your own reusable bags, it's very easy. It doesn't require anything other than a little bit of planning. So these things will matter so much. And once we move outside of that part, then we can go ahead and address our youth, our environment, our workspace, and all of these crucial places where we have the power to change and hopefully make a bigger impact. So I think I will just end by saying that yesterday is not ours to recover, unfortunately, but tomorrow is ours to win or lose. So I hope we all choose to win it, even if it only came to small actions on our day-to-day basis. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dina. Let's bring in Abdullah. Abdullah, you've taken on the issue of recycling, as we were discussing before. So tell us what impact recycling actually has on climate change. And also, you've launched projects, one of which is the Eco Dome, and that's to show the young generation specifically what's at stake if recycling doesn't take place. So talk to us about your experience there and any successes or challenges or any advice you have.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies. Today I'm going to speak about elite paper recycling and how I started this company. When I was 16 years old, I had a dream to build up something and make a difference. So I've chosen to recycle paper because we saw lots of waste paper throwing back on the streets, and no one is getting using this material actually. So we started the company back in 2015. Today, I'm very proud to say that Elite is recycling more than 3,000 tons every month, I mean. And we have more than 2,500 dumpsters located all around Qatar. And we have more than 100 trucks, which is running 24/7. And to reach this material and get it back to the factory and recycle it. And our main vision is not just to recycle, it's to give back to the community and to encourage CSR and to teach the young generation the importance of recycling, such as because they are building the future of tomorrow. So if they don't see the message, why is recycling important to save cutting the trees? Because end of the day, paper is a very important product and everyone uses it. But instead of using a virgin material, we said we can recycle this paper and to reduce the carbon footprint and the climate change as well. So that's why we're launching the program which is called the Eco Dome, and it's mainly to send a message to the young generation. What is the difference what will happen actually if you don't recycle? What will happen to the trees? Not just that, let us not all forget what happened in the Amazons. Everyone realized the importance of the oxygen, what we will lose there. It's not just something which is mainly in Qatar. It's a global responsibility actually. So that's why we're sending this message to the young generations to see a message. What is the difference if you don't recycle, and if you recycle, what will be the future? It will be two different environments if you want the world to be a deforestation or you want the world to be green. So we should teach them why it's very important to recycle there. And we have many other visions as well to teach and give back to the community and to show them what is the importance to recycle today. Thank you.
So the common theme I think I hear from the three of you is that how important education is, first of all, and the three of you through your project seem to be sending a message to the communities, and we also heard the same theme from Ms. Jayathma earlier today. You were mentioning the importance of climate education. So before I get to the guest questions, let me ask the three of you, through your messages, what kind of responses have you gotten? And do you think that the education that is out there at this point on climate change is enough? Is it going in the right direction, or more needs to be done? Mohammad.
So to be honest, I don't think education is up there to the point where we want it to be yet. At least as some of you know, there are no compulsory education about climate change in schools happening until a few days. Maybe Italy was the first country to do compulsory education for climate change. I believe there is a long way. More countries should get into the boat, should integrate climate change education into the system. What I mean is that it shouldn't be a course by itself because it's related to many things we do in our life. It should be integrated into the current course material. I believe that's the way it should be, but maybe I'll leave the floor to.
Okay, that's a good thought. Dina, do you agree? And also, we saw the protests in September. Remember the protests, the climate change protests, millions of people out everywhere. Do they make a difference?
So I am a firm believer in the power of one, and if I'm just saying about the one, just imagine what millions can do. I think in terms of protests, they are a very powerful tool, and we know it works. Just recently, in the UK, they announced an emergency for climate change. So that was something that will show us that the power of one and the power of our voices make a change. But what I really think we can do as individuals right now, here where we are, is to make that connection between our consumption, our day-to-day actions, and what it really ends up and what happens if we don't take care of it. So just thinking of Green Mangroves, like we take only about 8 people on our kayaking trip, so you think, oh, this is a very, very small number. But for me, if one person of all these 8 people thought about where that plastic will go and what kind of marine life they're affecting, I think that we've just established the first point of education. And it doesn't have to be in a classroom, like Mohammed said. It could be just getting people out there to realize the importance of their actions. And whether it's protests, whether it's just, seeing things and being aware, I think it matters.
Okay, great. And Abdullah, what's your opinion on this? And should the message be focused on influencing policy, for example? I know you do a lot of work with companies in the country. Or should it be on changing consumer behavior? Or should it be both? Is there anything else that we should focus on? Dina, can you just give him the microphone? Thank you.
Actually, we should send the message through presentations, maybe for the staff. We can give more programs about caring and recycling and show them the difference because it's all about knowledge at the end.
Okay. Any questions? This gentleman, can we pass around microphones, please? This gentleman right here. Yeah.
Hello, good morning. My name is Al Hassan. I'm from Yemen, actually. I'm having an organization called International Youth Council Yemen. Well, thank you very much for 3 of you for your great speech. I just not have a question. I have a comment, actually. We do such a programs on sending youth to the COP, actually. We do have a Yungo constituency, youth constituency. We send a global youth from the Global South scholarships to attend the climate change. And I was one of the scholars in 2017, actually. So what we do actually is we learn on how we engage and we negotiate with the policymakers and how the young generations can do something in their countries. So once I come back to my country, for example, I launch a climate change program in my organizations. So what I start to do is actually to launch a training on solar system, on using solar system on the houses in Yemen instead of using the electrical generators. So we achieved a lot, and now in Yemen, basically, especially in my area, in my town, in my city, most of the people, they have shifted to use solar systems. So this is one of the kind of actions that people, they need to do it, and they can implement it in their countries. One of the actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I was going to say you can speak to this because that's your experience.
I would like to relate to what you said. Personally, I learned first about climate change in high school, but it didn't really matter at that point, to be honest. Until 2012, I was at the last year of my bachelor's. I was studying petroleum engineering, and then I joined in COP18, which happened in Doha. And in here and there, I got involved, like emotionally, with the climate change issue. Maybe if I learned about climate change or I got committed to it earlier, I might have made a different decision. I'm not saying engineering is a bad choice, but maybe I would have done something different.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, this gentleman. Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, dear panelists. My name is Mohammad Al Hajj, renewable energy engineer in Kahrama and HBKU alumni as well.
There
In
you
fact,
go. You have an engineer.
I know Mohammed Al Hosni since a while.
Okay.
So I have two quick questions. First one is from Mohammed, is regarding how do we align the priorities for climate change activism between developing world and developed world countries? Because in a lot of developing world countries, yes, climate change is an issue, but electricity access is a more urgent issue actually. This is one question. The other question is for Abdullah, is does paper recycling or waste recycling in general have a business case in a country like Qatar where the amount of waste is actually very small? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Good questions.
So
Mohammed, go ahead.
regarding regarding climate change, well, I'd like to relate to sustainability first. When we say sustainability, what does it mean? It's about meeting today's needs without compromising future generations' needs. For example, we all have hydrocarbon resources, but we don't want to use so much of those resources that the future does not get the same opportunity as us. When it comes to priority, we are being developed. Let's be realistic. We need hydrocarbons. Otherwise, we will not be able to meet our basic needs, health, electricity, energy, and all of that. But it's about, to me, it's about the mentality. How do you use those resources? Do you have the mentality of just keep using them forever? Or do you have something in mind to use those resources to maybe develop other sustainable solutions so that the thing does not keep going forever? That's it to me, for me.
Okay, Abdullah, his question was, does Qatar have a case for paper recycling? Perhaps also, maybe give us some facts, if you have any, on the amount of paper that needs to be recycled, on the waste figures of the country. Any facts you may have, I think, would be beneficial.
Yes, for the waste in Qatar, it's more than 3,000 tons per day, which is the municipalities collecting, and 30% it's mainly paper and cardboard, and we collect all the waste and cardboard from that and from our own as well, and we recycle that and make new products, which is mainly cardboard and paper bags, which is mainly used for packaging industry and food packaging. So actually the country needs this, because how will you pack your daily item whenever you go to a grocery or to a supermarket? You're gonna buy anything, so it's already packed and packaged with cardboard. So instead of using virgin material, we're using our own recycled cardboard, and end of the day you're gonna throw it away, so it's gonna come back to the factory and we can recycle it and give it back again.
Would it be correct for me to say that your focus is mainly on paper? And if so, why? Why isn't there a focus on other products that can be recycled?
The bigger volume actually is cardboard and paper. It's the weight is less of the cardboard, but the volume is huge. So it really gives a problem for the municipality as well in the dumpsters, because it blocks the waste inside. So I thought of that in the beginning, to make recycling paper and cardboard, because mainly you don't need any more products to be added in that product to recycle. So it's 100% recycled and made in Qatar.
Okay. Any other questions?
Oh, okay. Hi.
Yes.
Hi, my name is
Go
Noel
ahead.
Akram. This question I think could be pretty open to anyone,
Sure.
but maybe Abdullah. So I know you're focusing more on awareness around youth and just generally the society. Overconsumption is one of the biggest, I think, disaster that we can do to the earth at the moment, because of capitalism and so many things can go on. How do we create a social awareness on overconsumption? Fast fashion is one of the biggest contributors to climate change and polluting the earth in general. So how do we create, in the society that we're in overconsumption, how can we create more awareness about it? And is it about, say, putting the responsibility on the fashion places or industries, or just generally the or is it about awareness and in society? So which thing plays a bigger role? Is it not taxing, but fining companies that are polluting the country in a bigger scale, or is it about creating more awareness and stricter rules for consumers? So what do you, or very open, anyone can answer.
Yeah, okay, good question. I'm going to have all three of them answer it.
Okay,
How about
there's
that?
like more the merrier,
Who
right?
wants to start? Go ahead, Muhammad.
To be honest, I think raising awareness and initiatives work. For example, in Qatar we had Tarshid, an initiative by Kahrama, and I believe they had really good results from that initiative. Between 2012 and 2016, they were able to reduce electricity and water consumption by around 20%, just by that initiatives. We don't know about tax since, or at least I don't know about taxes because, as you know, in Qatar we don't
Yeah,
have
I know.
tax for
First
that.
came
Thankfully,
out.
yes.
And let me just add on to that before we move on. So how, if part of her question was, how do you create awareness on overconsumption?
Well, previously maybe it was through TV programs and all of that, but now I believe through media, it works really well, at least for me. When I learned first about aerators, to save water, switching lights to LED lights, all of those were through infographies through social media.
So through your work, you've focused on social media?
Oh, the way you're asking about the way I work, or
Yeah,
the way I think it works?
give us your personal twist on this subject.
Well, yeah, for my I did my master's in HBKU in sustainable energy, and during that education journey, I would say, I learned a lot about what we can do. And for me, it was personal connections to people. When I sit with people, we discuss climate change. I would inform them about what small changes they can do in life to save a lot. That's the way I raise awareness through my personal circle of relationship. Maybe through social media, as I said, I retweet a few infographies by Kahrama, Tarshid, and all of the other contributors and influencers in climate change.
Okay. Dina?
So I'll mainly focus on the fast fashion aspect because I think it is really way overlooked, and the fact that tons of fabrics get dumped in the dumpsters and just going on to so what happens when you throw them in the dumpsters, that you actually end up having piles of clothes that can actually be worn again ways and way more times, but what happens is that they decompose sometimes over a long period of time, release methane, which basically
consumers are becoming more conscious, but um, are we at a point where it's good enough yet? Are we getting in that direction? What, Dina? A lot more needs to be done. A little more. Just gauge where we are for us.
I think we are at a very important pivoting point. It's either we win or we lose in terms of climate. So just knowing that the power that we have right now, what we've made so far, is not unfortunately enough. Yes, single action matters, but then we will have to go beyond that. Just like the strikes in the UK, I think we need to go more. Obviously, not going on strikes, just basically making sure that we are abiding by standards that are out there and they're accessible for us to make bigger impact. So it's not really enough, unfortunately.
Okay, I'll have to leave it there, you guys. I'm sorry we've run out of time, but I told you they were super interesting, all three of them, real pioneers in the work that they're doing. So good luck, guys. We really appreciate your time and your advice. It's been great, and thank you very much for sticking around for this first panel. I hope you guys have a successful Doha forum.
We'll now cut to break until 11:30, and we can continue the conversations in the break area. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The next session will commence shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're outside in the networking area or the coffee break, please make your way back to the auditorium. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, a reminder, the next session is starting now.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Is it a policy or? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Is this okay?
Hello.
Yeah. I just left.
Hello. Hello, mic check. Hello. Hello. Hello,
Okay.
mic check.
No worries.
All right.
Hello.
Thank
Hello,
you.
mic check.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. and gentlemen, please take your seats as we're now going to begin. Welcome back, and we're delighted to welcome to the stage Nelufar Hidayat. Nelufar is an award-winning journalist and who's currently a correspondent for the Doha debates, and she's going to interview Mr. Ibrahim, the senior advisor to the State Ministry for Peace in Afghanistan, and the former acting mayor of Kabul.
I hope this is working. Can you all hear me? Well done for being here on time. Everybody else is tardy, and I should be taking notes. Thank you again for joining us at the Doha Forum Youth Forum. I thank you very much for that introduction. I am, of course, joined by a fellow countryman. In fact, we're from the same city, Kabul. So this is actually a really interesting conversation that I would have had on or off the stage, and I'm just pleased to be doing it here with you guys. I'm sure people will be filtering in, so I'll buy them some time, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Shahaib's accomplishment. Not only have you worked for the State Ministry of Peace for years and been a senior advisor there, but you've previously worked in the Ministry of Defense in various capacities, including the senior financial advisor to the minister himself. You were, as previously stated, the acting mayor in Kabul. That's a city of 5 million people, a growing, burgeoning city with its own complex array of challenges and possibilities. And then, of course, you have been a fellow at the Asia Society, the Rumsfeld Foundation, and you're a Duke University alumni. That's a lot of credits to your name, Shahaib. Welcome.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me.
So I think we're basically ready to begin as people filter in. I wanted to start off just by understanding the complexity of Kabul itself, where you were the acting mayor for a time. Try and paint me a picture of what it's like to try and look after you are the custodian of these people. What was that like for you when you were the acting mayor?
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be invited to participate in this event. Kabul is a very diverse city, and it's a very vibrant city with a young population. That's not the image that people have of Kabul because of the ongoing conflict and because of the negative imagery of war that's going on. But when you live in Kabul, and if you're trying to manage and run Kabul, like I was trying to do for a while, what you have to do essentially is maintain a level of service that is, this not working? You have to maintain, okay, thank you. You have to maintain a level of service that is satisfactory to a very demanding population. They're active in social media, they're active in offline, non-social media, just media in general. And if you make a misstep, I think they're very, very critical of the quality of service. So you have to always be on your feet and to ensure that you not only manage expectations, but also actually deliver on the promise and the platform that you ran on.
Certainly true. I have family that live in Kabul to this day, and the Kabulese know how to complain like nobody else. It's a pastime that we have. But you made some really important points. It's a young, diverse city that's burgeoning. It's constantly growing for lots of reasons. It's one of the more peaceful cities, but it has its own challenges because of its location. Now, I want to take you back to when you were growing up. You didn't grow up in Kabul. In fact, you moved all over the continent of Asia before you ended up in Singapore. Did you say you had been to? You've been to so many places. Take me back to when you were younger, Shahaib. What was it like trying to get an education, being from a country that's in turmoil and in constant upheaval of war?
I think my experience growing up is not that unique for my generation. A lot of people were forced to flee the country, live in the neighboring countries. I was born in Pakistan, and I was there for a couple of years, and I grew up essentially moving around Afghanistan. So in terms of education, I've been exposed to a very wide range of education systems. And I think the only constant in my life was my family or my parents, and they're the ones who provided that continuity. And their emphasis and focus on making sure that their children get the best education available, whatever that meant, wherever we were.
What did that mean?
So it kind of meant, the best school available. My Afghan school, an Iranian school, and so I am the product of many different education systems, if that makes any sense. And so that kind of makes it very tough to fit people with such a profile in a box. You think differently, you behave differently, your thinking, your thought process is slightly different. So to be able to function and to have a senior government position back home in Afghanistan, I had to essentially adapt to that context to a certain extent to be considered acceptable, or so people could understand and communicate with me better.
That's a really interesting point. Now, you are successful by many measures. What has led to your success? How has being Afghan or living in Kabul helped you succeed?
I think it's the same for anybody else around the world. You just have a goal and you work hard at it. But I think in Afghanistan's case, what makes it a bigger challenge is that because of the ongoing conflict and because of the risks involved, my non-Afghan friends found it difficult on why I was continuing to commit to my country, to my city, and why I didn't just leave and settle anywhere else.
Like my parents did. I mean, my parents were like, it's too dangerous, we can't stay here, my daughter won't be able to get an education. And so we left because we had no choice. But what I find incredibly interesting is that you left and then you came back and you've made Kabul your home. So I just wanted to understand why you felt that urge, the need to go back to where you're from.
Well, I can share my personal experience. I'm not sure if it'll resonate with anybody or not, but I think when you are growing up in other countries that you're not, your passport doesn't belong to, let's just define it like that because it's very difficult to conceptualize, then people constantly remind you that you don't belong there. You're never really from that country. And what that does is that kind of damages your ability to associate at a deeper emotional level with that context. And there becomes a need, in my case, there was a need for me to make sure that I was a useful member of my own society. I was seen as somebody who belonged. I was seen as somebody who tried to do good things for my country, and I'm still trying. So I think that the fact that
So I want to move on a little bit. Grow up in Kabul in Afghanistan. What about young people today in countries like Afghanistan, specifically in cities like Kabul? Because Kabul is not unique. There are cities that face their own, they don't all have to be war zones, but I can think of many. Recently I was in Lagos a couple of years ago, and they have their own set of extreme challenges. So I wonder, when you're a young person in somewhere like Lagos or Kabul or San Salvador with its own set of challenges, how can you even reach your potential? What are the barriers, and what kind of things are there to help you?
Oh, well, that's a very big question. I think that, of course, economic opportunities and the level of development of an economy in a country dictates what options you have. But I think what's more important is recognizing the fact that we live in a time where nation states and just owning a passport doesn't define who you are. Identities have become global, and I think the sooner we recognize that you're not necessarily defined by where you're from, and then you're given options and opportunities based on that, we might be able to utilize a lot of the hidden energy that's there among the younger population. And I think we reach there, especially in the East, by opening up these discussions of identity, trying to question and critically analyze what it means to be from Afghanistan, from Pakistan. What does it mean to be from Qatar, for example, or from any other country in this part of the world, where we have a very classic notion of nationalism, we have a very classic notion of patriotism, where in the West it's not so much. People are not so much attached to the passport, but more their individual sense or cultural sense of what it means to exist. And a lot of people say, well, the West has the luxury to think like that and feel like that. For a lot of the countries which are still struggling economically, we might not have those options, but I think that it's not necessarily a resource constraint, it's not an economic argument.
I only asked because a decade ago, UNICEF declared that Afghanistan was the worst place in the world to be born. Well, a decade ago, those kids are now 10. So I'm wondering how much has changed in order for them to have opportunities that maybe you and I, if we were to stay in Afghanistan, we would not have. So what has changed for young people when it comes to education in Afghanistan?
I think as a country, we're a very young population. Over 80% is below the age of 35, between 18 to 35. And over the past 5 years, there's been a proactive attempt to recruit young professionals in the government, in senior government decision-making positions in the government. So I think that move has allowed for a more refreshed sense of public policy. So there's more vigor, there's more energy, there's more focus on making sure there's more opportunities for the youth in terms of employment, in terms of just access, in terms of how the cities are shaped. But again, our context and Afghanistan's context is extremely, extremely restrained by the conflict and by the war. But there are a lot of opportunities when it comes to non-government platforms. We have a lot of civil society initiatives, we have a lot of NGOs and just young people trying to do things, not waiting for some donor or for some country to try and fund it.
So what are some of your favorites? What can you point to that we might know about that young people are doing to like almost, I hate this phrase, but they're pulling themselves by their own bootstraps. They're trying to make do of what is a very, very difficult set of circumstances.
On education, for example, there's this very interesting initiative called Charmaz, which means walnut. It's a mobile library. So the founder, a good friend of mine, Frishta Karim, she got these buses. She turned them into a library for kids with children's books, and she goes around the city, and a lot of children have access to books now, children's books, things that they usually would not have access to. For example, if it's a non-education on arts, there's art lords, where we try to depict a lot of the realities of our society through art. So I think what I would like to put out there is, I think that Qatar Foundation, Doha Forum, all these other platforms, which are amazing because it's very unique in this part of the world to try and support critical thinking and debate. If they were to partner up with small entities, NGOs like this, I think it would be very, very meaningful. It would actually change and have some proper impact on the beneficiaries of that in Afghanistan.
One of the main challenges that people in Afghanistan, especially the young people in Afghanistan, face, as you mentioned, is economic restraints, but also safety and peace. In your capacity at the Ministry for Peace, what are you doing specifically to target young people and give them space to be able to grow and achieve what they are supposed to, both in secondary and tertiary education, but also in, as you said, developing their own businesses, being entrepreneurial. What is happening?
So the Ministry of Peace is a newly created platform, but one of the fundamental issues that we recognize is the fact that we need to make sure that peace is not just a project that you achieve. Peace is ensuring that there's end of conflict in a society and making sure that there are conflict resolution mechanisms. It's to essentially make sure that the education empowers people to do that. That the education teaches and gives necessary tools for people growing up to be able to deal with a lot of these conflict issues, because it's very complicated. Countries like us have ethnic narratives, historic narratives, ideological narratives, and if education doesn't empower people to deal with that in a constructive way, then it becomes harder and harder to live together, and then people exploit those differences and continue to flame the conflict, which is a sad reality that we're trying to deal with.
There are peace negotiations going on in Afghanistan, on and off, for the last 10 years that I can think of. There were recent attempts made by the US government as well. They didn't go so well. What are you hoping for going forward? We're thinking about the future here. What are you trying to do at the Ministry of Peace to try and get a situation that young people, but also all Afghan folk can actually prosper? What are you looking forward to in 2020, and what are you doing about it?
I think that a lot of people are pessimistic because a lot of these attempts did not actually result in reduction of violence or the reality of war changing. So I think what we are trying to focus on is that we recognize that regional political, geopolitical interest and global geopolitical interest has aligned, and there's a window of opportunity to actually end this conflict. We've had war for 40 years, and that damages a society to a much deeper level. What we're going to try to do is we're going to try to use this opportunity and not let it go to waste. And anybody who has constructively supported us in this cause, we have welcomed and appreciated very, very much.
In recent months, after the recent peace negotiations didn't turn out well, there's been several ceasefires that have been negotiated. And some of them have held, some of them haven't. But they have created little windows, little pockets of time in Afghanistan where people can sort of get about their daily lives and experience a sense of peace and tranquility, even if it's for a few hours or a couple of days. Psychologically, what does that kind of do to a population within Afghanistan? How do those moments when you're not worried about survival, how do they help the psyche of the nation?
Last year, for the first time in a very, very long time, there was a unilateral 3-day ceasefire announced during Eid. Nobody thought it would work. And strangely enough, we saw people from both sides interact peacefully. A lot of selfies, a lot of pictures, people meeting their relatives, going to districts where they haven't been able to go to for years. And I think what that ceasefire for 3 days, what it did was it changed the assumptions of a lot of the people who are, a lot of the stakeholders in Afghanistan. And it showed them that the people can actually live together and they don't always have to continue being in this violent relationship. So yes, my answer is yes, it has a very profound effect on the psychology of the people. It made them believe that peace was actually possible, and also made a lot of the people involved in Afghanistan believe that it was possible. And I think that effort by our president kind of spurred a lot of the effort that we have right now and the progress that we've made.
You've got 2 kids, who I've seen photos of, they're beautiful, and a wife in Afghanistan. What was it like for them to experience those 3 days? And I read some of the news reports in local Afghan, I watched Ariana TV, and as a member of the diaspora, I only live vicariously through people like you. But you were there, you experienced what that sulha, what that peace meant. What was it like for you guys to be aware of this? I mean, I know it doesn't have much effect, but it has more of an effect in the surrounding areas, in the provinces of Afghanistan, where the fighting and the division is more acute. But what was that like personally for you, as an Afghan citizen?
So Kabul as the capital is the political economic capital of the country. So it's the target of a lot of these attacks. So people living in Kabul residents experience this war as well, sometimes more than the provinces because it's such a concentrated center of power. So a lot of people came to Kabul, a lot of members of the Taliban came to Kabul, and people greeted them, there were exchanges, there were hugs, and there was a mixed response. Certain people didn't trust that it would stand, but it actually did. And I think for my family and for my friends, that the air felt different afterwards. There was a greater sense that this is actually achievable. Not all hope is lost. This is not a lost cause. And I think that's very important that you maintain hope.
I like that. Sorry, that question was just for me as an Afghan. Let's go back to education. Let's go back to how politics and geopolitics can shape education. I want to focus a little bit and try to understand the diversity within Afghanistan, which you mentioned as a strength, can also be a serious point of a problem, let's just say. Kabul certainly is diverse, but it's the capital. In the surrounding provinces and the vastness of Afghanistan and how disparate these communities are can have a massive impact on education. For example, the schools that you have access to in Kabul, you have nowhere near that level of access in the provinces. And I just wanted to read a stat out to you that really shocked me, which is that only 16% of Afghanistan schools are girls only, and many parents demand a girls only school to be able to send their children safely there. What are you doing as a government, but also within your capacity as the Ministry of Peace, to help get girls into education and then stay in education? I mean, the statistics are quite horrific for how many girls stay in secondary and tertiary education.
I think it's a challenge that we're dealing with. This is not just an issue of resource. I think it's an issue of cultural acceptance. It's an issue of making sure that families feel like their children and their girls are going into a safe environment. I'm not just talking about safe in terms of violence. I'm talking if it's culturally safe, if it's socially acceptable. It is far more socially acceptable now in 2019 in urban centers in Afghanistan. It's actually the reverse. If a family does not send their girl to a school, they will be frowned upon. They're like, why are you taking away their opportunities? But that's a lot of that is still pockets. I think what we have to do, what we're trying to do, is demonstrate through role models, through girls and women who have been educated and served as positive members of society. Highlighting that kind of inspires a lot of other girls, as well as makes families far more comfortable in allowing and supporting that kind of education. And I think any healthy society, it's just not possible to have a healthy society without ensuring that there's education in the female population.
When we are talking about reconciliation talks and possibly including the Taliban into some sort of new government in Afghanistan, how likely is it that these girls can count on you and the current government, which, I mean, we've just gone through elections, so I'm not really sure what I mean by current government, but you know what I'm trying to get at. How crucial will it be to make sure that those stakeholders, those young girls, are protected and their voices and their positions are protected?
Well, it's very important.
How can you ensure it?
You ensure it by making sure that the voice is heard and make sure there's representation, not just women fighting for women's rights and girl education, but men fighting for it. I have a daughter. I want to send her to school. And if somebody will come here and tell me that you cannot do that, I will stand up and I will fight for it. I think now there's a general understanding that even among the Taliban, I'm sure their daughters go to school, the ones who can afford it. I'm sure that there is a common denominator in terms of education, regardless of your political leaning, regardless of how you interpret religious scripture, etc. I think that we can all agree that education is the way to go. To the extent of it, it needs to be argued, but I think to your point, I will, at least on a personal level, make sure that representation is there, and there are many who feel the same way.
I really like that. I'm going to do a time check because I have no idea. Oh, we're out of time. One more question. I'm being allowed one more question. The Afghan government does a lot to get women to participate in politics and to have that representation. In fact, you did quite a lot in your role as acting mayor to have women in your department and working for you. How important is the representation of that diversity in government? Because we have many different tribes, we have many different communities. How important is that to making sure that however Afghanistan progresses, it's all Afghans and not just some?
It's important. The reason why I did that was twofold. First, because I very strongly felt that the mayor's office in Kabul municipality was not a female-friendly environment. For you to create that, you need to put more women in charge. It's very simple, straightforward. The second reason was because running the city, men weren't doing too good a job in running the city, I'll be very frank. So, involving more and more women would give it a more family perspective on women's needs, on families' needs, on children's needs. And I think that I did this. I hired I actually hired the first deputy mayor of Kabul who was female, and then on the lower management level. And I think it has had a very positive impact on making sure that the city is slowly thinking more about how to make it more family friendly.
Ibrahim, thank you so much. I hope you guys have got a little glimpse into the future of Afghanistan being one that might be a bit more prosperous, and we're really hopeful for it. Thank you guys for listening to our conversation. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and now we'll set up for the next session, but first we have another video for you all to watch.
So I don't think my birth country represents who I am.
Not at all. That question is very vague to ask me especially.
Because I moved
from my birth country 3 years after I was born.
I grew up in like multiple countries like Australia, China, UAE.
And like I know my native language, but I can't read or write it, for example. So it depends upon the external factors that contribute in your grooming, in your upbringing.
I think culture and ideology have a lot to do with a person's identity.
Especially in the environment you live in, like there are cultural events and then you go to like private schools so that there are events from there.
Depending on where they're born can make up more or less of that.
Country does represent you to some extent, what you really are.
There's no denying that it makes up a potentially significant part of their identity, but it's not the most important thing.
And now please welcome the moderator of our second panel, Education, Politics, and Conflict Zones, The Quest by Identity, moderated by Mohammad Al Hassan.
السلام عليكم ومرحبا بسعادتكم وبالحضور في هذه الجلسة التي سوف نناقش بها موضوع سياسة التعليم في مناطق الصراع ودور الهوية في هذا الموضوع. معكم رئيسة الجلسة ثناء حسن الصلابي، مسؤول البرامج في مؤسسة وايز للابتكار في التعليم. أظهرت دراسة أجرتها اليونيسف عام 2016 أن 250 مليون من الشباب يعيشون في مناطق الصراع حول العالم، والمقصود بمناطق الصراع هي مناطق يوجد فيها نزاع مستمر مسلح بين جماعات متنافسة، أو حيث كان هناك نزاع في العشر سنوات الماضية. في سياق كل من هذه حالات الطوارئ والأزمات التي طال أمدها، موضوع التعليم موضوع نقاش أساسي. فمثلا أي منهج يتعلمه الطالب اللاجئ وأي منهج يجب أن يتعلم، هذه مواضيع قد يتم تسييسها من الحكومات المستضيفة، وأيضا إنها حساسة جدا للجاليات اللاجئين. السياسة التعليمية قادرة على إثارة حساسيات الهوية للفرد وللثقافة. ومعي لكي نناقش هذا الموضوع أود أن أعرف بالمتحدثات الآنسة مزون المليحان، سفيرة النوايا الحسنة لليونيسف، الآنسة أروى السنوسي، ضابط حماية أطفال سابقا في المفوضية السامية لحماية اللاجئين، والآنسة العنود الكواري، مناصرة قضايا الشباب بمؤسسة التعليم فوق الجميع. أود أن أشكركم لحضوركم، وأود أن أسأل الآنسات أول سؤال للجميع: ما هو الدور الذي يلعبه التعليم في تنمية الهوية أثناء انعدام الأمن وفي أوقات الصراع؟
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أود أن أرحب بسعادتكم بالحضور الكريم. ردا على سؤالك، مما لا شك فيه يحوي التعليم الفرد في عدة جوانب، فهو فرصة بأن يستكشف العالم واهتماماته وقدراته ومواهبه، وإنما ذلك في بيئة آمنة وبناءة. في المناطق التي تعاني الصراع وانعدام الأمن يصبح دور التعليم في حياة الأطفال المنفذ الوحيد الذي يحميهم، وكون أن المجتمع الذي يعيش به غير مستقر يصبح التعليم الأداة الوحيدة التي تصقل هويته وتغرس به الصفات الحميدة والأخلاقية عندما لا يستطيع المجتمع بفعل ذلك. ولهذا السبب أسست مثلا منظمة التعليم فوق الجميع برامج مخصصة فقط للأطفال الذين يعانون من مناطق التي تعيش في حالة صراع مسلحة، مثل الفخورة، علم طفل، وحماية التعليم في ظروف النزاع وانعدام الأمن، التي تركز على مستوى محلي ومستوى سياسي لمساعدة هذه الأطفال وحماية التعليم للأجيال المستقبلية.
بداية بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أنا سعيدة جدا بتواجدي معكم جميعا. طبعا التعليم، يعني عندما نتكلم عن التعليم فهو لا يقتصر على المدرسة ولا على الامتحانات أو على الدروس التي نتلقاها في الصفوف أو في الجامعات أو في أي مكان حقيقة، لأن التعليم ودوره كبير جدا. يعني نحن لا نستطيع أن نحصر أهمية التعليم في جملة أو جملتين، يعني دقيقة واحدة غير كافية حقيقة كي نتحدث عن أهمية التعليم، لكن نستطيع أن نقول أن التعليم هو الأساس الذي يمكن الفرد من معرفة نفسه ومعرفة مجتمعه ومعرفة كل التحديات التي تواجهه، وأيضا تعطيه القوة الكافية كي يحمي نفسه ويحافظ على هويته. عندما يكون الشخص غير متعلما في الواقع لا يستطيع أن يحافظ على هذه الهوية ولا يستطيع أحيانا التعبير عنها بشكل كافي. لذلك عندما نكون متعلمون، عندما نملك المعرفة الكافية، فإننا نستطيع أن نحمي هويتنا، نستطيع أن نحفظ هويتنا، نستطيع أيضا مواجهة التحديات، لأن التعليم دائما هو الشيء الذي يعطينا أمل. فأنا من خلال يعني تجربتي الشخصية عندما غادرت وطني أدركت أهمية التعليم أكثر وأكثر. أنا طبعا أحب التعليم يعني منذ البداية، لكن اللحظة التي تركت فيها وطني، اللحظة التي كانت يعني الحد الفاصل في حياتي، هي اللحظة التي تركت فيها كل شيء، لكن الشيء الذي بقي معي هو تعليمي، هو الشيء الذي تعلمته. لذلك المعرفة هي الشيء الذي يبقى معنا في كل مكان وزمان، وهو الشيء الذي يؤهلنا كي يعني نكون أقوياء في هذه الحياة وأن لا نفقد الأمل. يعني ما دمنا نملك الأمل فإن الحياة يعني ستكون سهلة. هي يعني ليست سهلة بمعنى أنها لا يوجد تحديات، لكن سهلة بأننا نستطيع أن نفهم التحديات، نستطيع إيجاد الحلول، نستطيع أن يعني نملك أفكارا بناءة لبناء مجتمعنا ومساهمة يعني في بناء العالم ككل. يعني التعليم لا يقتصر أنا إذا كنت متعلمة أساعد وطني أو أساعد نفسي، إنما هو دوري كي أساعد الآخرين أيضا.
فقط إضافة سريعة بالنسبة للنقاط التي ذكرت. في اتفاقيات عالمية وفي آليات دولية وإقليمية تنص على حقوق الطفل. مثلا الإعلان العالمي لحقوق الإنسان ينص على حق الطفل في التعليم، لكن اتفاقية حقوق الطفل المادة الثامنة فيها تنص على احترام حق الطفل في الحفاظ على هويته. احنا دائما ننظر للهوية على أنها رفاهية، ولكن الحقوق في الاتفاقيات العالمية تضمن للطفل حقه في الاحتفاظ على هويته. نجد بيئة المدرسة أو المدارس بشكل عام أظن أنها تكون بيئة لتعليم احترام الثقافات والتعايش والتقبل والقبول بين بعض وتنمية الهوية، وهذا أظن اللي هو دور التعليم في تنمية الهوية بالنسبة للأطفال في قضايا الصراع.
شكرا على الإجابات المفيدة جدا في هذا الموضوع. مزون، أود أن أسألك من تجربتك الشخصية، ما رأيك في أي منهج يجب أن يتعلمه الطالب اللاجئ؟ هل هو منهج محايد أو منهج دولة المنشأ أو منهج دولة الذي يتم استضافته فيها في اللجوء، أو منهج جديد عالمي للطالب في العصر العولمة؟ أي من هذه المناهج ترين أنها مفيدة أكثر للطالب اللاجئ؟
في الحقيقة يعني سؤال جدا مهم وعميق. حتى أنا تجربتي يعني ليست بالكافية للإجابة على هذا السؤال، لكن أستطيع القول يعني من خلال تجربتي الشخصية أن الطريقة الأمثل من أجل دراسة المنهاج هو يعني منهاج الدولة المستضيفة، لأنه الحاضر يعني الذي نعيشه. يعني ما دمت أنا أعيش في دولة، فعلى سبيل المثال أنا عشت في المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية، وكنت يعني فخورة جدا أن أدرس منهاجها وأن أتلقى التعليم وأحصل على شهادة من تلك الدولة، لأنني لو درست على سبيل المثال المنهاج السوري لا يوجد الكثير من الأطفال درسوا نفس المنهاج في المخيمات، وأن التعليم يعني في المنهاج السوري ليس متوفرا للجميع. يعني لا يمكن توفير المنهاج السوري حتى يعني بما يخص الكتب والكوادر التدريسية. يعني من الصعب جدا أن يتم نقل كل ذلك إلى أماكن تواجد اللاجئين. لذلك يعني واعتقادي الشخصي هو منهج الدولة المستضيفة سيكون يعني الطريقة الأمثل، لأنه يعطي للطفل المستقبل وتمكنه يعني أيضا من يعني أن يعيش في المجتمع وأن يكون جزء من المجتمع الذي يعيش فيه، ويستطيع يعني الحصول على المهارات الكافية.
أظن أنه رأي مهم جدا، وأوافقك الرأي بالذات في مواضيع إن كانت هناك اختلاف في اللغة. يجب للتعايش يجب أن يتعلم الطالب لغة البلد الذي يسكن
نعم
فيها.
ليندمج فيه أيضا.
نعم.
يعني أنا من دون لغة وتعلم للغة للدولة التي أعيش فيها لا أستطيع أن أندمج في ذلك المجتمع.
صحيح.
في العكس يعني أنا مثلا لو تعلمت اللغة ودرست منهاج الدولة التي أعيش فيها فهذا سيضيف الكثير إلى هويتي وإلى يعني مهاراتي التي سوف أستخدمها في بناء وطن يعني في المستقبل.
أود أن أسأل أروى سؤالا، لأنك عملتي في هذه المخيمات من ناحية عمل. من تجربتك في العمل مع الأطفال في السودان، ما هي العقبات في دراسة منهج بلد المنشأ في مخيمات اللجوء؟ وكيف يتم تطوير الهوية الثقافية للأطفال في تلك المخيمات؟ وكيف يتم احتوائهم في نظام التعليم؟
شكرا للسؤال. أظن أن أول تعليق لي إنه الفكرة السائدة الخاطئة إنه اللاجئين موجودين في مخيمات. أغلبية اللاجئين بيكونوا خارج المخيمات، يا إما في المدن أو في الريف. لما نجي لتصميم المناهج التعليمية وتصميم البرامج التعليمية للأسف تصمم لأطفال موجودين في المخيمات، واحتياجات الأطفال الموجودين خارج المخيمات في أغلب الأوقات لا تؤخذ بعين الاعتبار. بس مثلا إنه الأطفال اللي في المدن يعيشوا في سياق مختلف، سياق متنوع، بيئة مختلفة. الأطفال في الريف حتى اللاجئين منهم في سياق مختلف. في مواسم حصاد أن المفروض يأخذوها في عين الاعتبار. موسم الحصاد بالنسبة للسنة الدراسية وين يقع؟ وهل يؤدي أن الأطفال يطلعوا من المدارس عشان هم والله يشتغلوا؟ وعمالة الأطفال كلها أسئلة لا تؤخذ بعين الاعتبار عند تصميم المناهج الدراسية بالنسبة للأطفال اللاجئين. وهذا يأثر على تجربتهم التعليمية بشكل عام. بس أيضا حتى الأطفال اللاجئين في شيء خاص بالنسبة لهم، خياراتهم المستقبلية. يعني الطفل اللاجئ خياراته المستقبلية أو الحلول الدائمة، ما يسمى بالحلول الدائمة للأطفال اللاجئين، يا إما تكون عودة طوعية أو يكون إدماج داخل المجتمع المحلي المستضيف أو إعادة توطين. كل واحد من هذه الحلول يتطلب نظام تعليمي مختلف. يعني إذا الطفل بيسافر، الطفل اللاجئ بيسافر إعادة توطين لبلد ثالث، احتياجاته التعليمية مختلفة تماماً عن طفل سيتم دمجه في المجتمع المضيف. احتياجاته مختلفة تماماً عن طفل سيعود عودة طوعية إلى بلده الأم. فإذا بتنظري على أنه هو يعني سبيكترم أو مجال مختلف تماماً من احتياجات الأطفال، فما نقدر نقعد مثلاً ونقول أنه والله الحل المناسب للأطفال اللاجئين هو كذا أو المنهج المناسب هو كذا. لازم ناخذ على اختلاف السياق واختلاف البيئة تختلف احتياجات هذه الأطفال، وعليه تختلف الحلول اللي لازم تكون مفصلة لكل سياق بطريقة مختلفة.
شكرا على الإجابة. أظن أن هناك موضوع طيف الاختلاف في الاحتياجات لهؤلاء الأطفال موضوع مهم جدا. العنود، أود أن أسألك لأنك تمثلين مؤسسة التعليم فوق الجميع التي تعمل على وصول 10 مليون طفل حول العالم إلى المدارس. هل تعتقدين أن التعليم يمكن أن يصوغ الهوية الوطنية للشباب؟ وهل يمكن أن ينمي التعليم هوية الشخص في حالة الصراع، إن كانت من عمل مؤسسة من خارج هذه البلد مثل الجمعية التي أنت تمثلينها؟
بالطبع، يعني لأن التعليم في نهاية اليوم هي الأداة التي تستخدمها الدول لسرد قصتها، لسرد تاريخها، وإقناع الشعوب بهويتها، وهي الطريقة الوحيدة التي توجه مهني وتوجه أخلاقي للشعوب. واحدة الجوانب التي حيث أن المنهج كما ذكرنا أنه يؤثر على فكر الطالب وأهدافه وتوجهاته في الحياة، فيحدد ملامح هويته الشخصية والوطنية. وفي هذا الإطار نجد مواد مثل الاجتماعيات، التاريخ، المواطنة، التي من خلالها تبث الدولة أهدافها على الجيل الصاعد. لأنني درست في مدرسة خاصة، كانت دراستي تركز أيضا على الاجتماعيات وعلى تاريخ قطر لبث المواطنة القطرية في الطلاب، وليس فقط في الطلاب نفسهم بل أيضا بالمقيمين. فناهيك مثلا عن اللاجئين الذين يعيشون في دول الأخرى ويدرسون مناهج مثلا ألمانية ولا فرنسية. فبهذا السبب، بسبب حساسية المنهج نفسه، منظمة التعليم فوق الجميع لا تقوم بتطوير مناهج خاصة، بل بالعكس تتبع مناهج مؤسسة من الأساس وتعطي الدعم لهذه المناهج لتتأكد أن الطفل يتعلم في منهج صحيح وكامل وشامل الذي لا يدمجه في الوطن الذي يعيش فيه حاليا. صحيح أن قد مثل ما ذكرت أروى قد يرجعون بعد تطوعيا لاحقا، أو قد يكملون دراستهم ويعيشون في المدينة المستضيفة. لهذا السبب هذه المناهج جدا مهمة من ناحية أنها تسمح لهم بأن يندمجون وينخرطون في هذه المجتمعات الجديدة.
شكرا على الإجابة. هذا يتطرق في الموضوع الذي أود أن نتناقش جميعا فيه، وهو هل يمكن أن يكون لمناهج التعليم هوية محايدة، أو هل يمكن أن يصنعون مواطنين محايدين في مجالات التعليم؟ فأود أن أسأل هذا السؤال للجميع وأن أسمع آراءكم المختلفة في هذا الموضوع.
طبعا يعني هذا سؤال جدا مهم بما يخص يعني التعليم أن يكون محايدا. أنا يعني في اعتقادي الشخصي أعتقد هذا يعتمد على التعليم نفسه. فمثلا المواد العلمية التي ندرسها هي يتفق عليها جميع العالم. يعني أنا لا أستطيع أن أغير قوانين الفيزياء ولا قوانين الكيمياء ولا طريقة حل يعني المعادلات الرياضية على سبيل المثال. لكن عندما يتعلق الأمر في المواد الأدبية بما يخص يعني التاريخ، بما يخص دراسات دينية، بما يخص الجغرافيا وهذه الأمور لا يمكن أن تكون محايدة، يعني لأنها متصلة اتصالا وثيقا في الهوية ومتصلة اتصالا وثيقا في الدين والعرق وما إلى ذلك. فعلى سبيل المثال يعني الأمة العربية وعلى اختلاف يعني دولها وجنسياتها ما تزال تملك هوية واحدة، يعني منبثقة طبعا من الدين الإسلامي وتاريخه العظيم الذي كان يعني له الأثر الأكبر على تكوين هويتنا وصنعها، وما يزال طبعا حاضرا يعني من خلال ممارساتنا الدينية وشعائرنا الدينية التي نقوم بها. فعندما ندرس موادنا في التاريخ وعندما ندرس موادنا في الدين فإننا لا نستطيع أن نهمل هويتنا أو نهمل تاريخنا وأصلنا. لذلك هذا ينطبق على الدول الأخرى. فمثلا في أوروبا يتم تدريسهم أيضا يعني من مبدأ ديني عن الديانة المسيحية وكيف أثرت على تكوين وصنع جغرافيا أوروبا، وأيضا كيف يعني كان للحروب أثر كبير عليها مثل الحروب العالمية، الحرب العالمية الأولى والثانية، كيف يعني غيرت مسار التاريخ في تلك الدول. فأنا أعتقد هذه المواد لا يمكن طبعا أن تكون محايدة. لكن يعني عندما نتكلم عن التعليم نستطيع من خلال التعليم تكوين ثقافة تقبل الآخر، احترام الآخر، لأن الإنسان يعني إذا كان يحترم نفسه وكان يحترم يعني مجتمعه وثقافته فلا بد يعني أن يحترم الآخر. أنا إذا كنت أحترم نفسي وكنت أحترم ديني فيكون دوري إيجابي. يعني أنا لا أستطيع أن أحترم ديني وأفعل أفعال خاطئة ستؤثر سلبا على هويتي. يعني أنا إذا كنت أريد أن أمثل وطني أو أمثل أي شيء يخصني يجب أن تكون أفعالي هي من تتحدث عني ليس أقوالي. فأنا مهما تحدثت وقلت ديني كذا وديني كذا وهويتي كذا، الطرف الآخر الذي لا يعرف عني سيرى أفعالي وسيحكم علي من ذلك المنطلق. لذلك تربية أجيالنا من خلال التعليم بث يعني الطرق الصحيحة فيهم ونغرس هذه البذرة يعني الطيبة منذ البداية تستطيع حقا يعني أن تبني أجيال عظيمة، أجيال ليس فقط أن تبني وطنها بل ستكون لها تأثير كبير يعني على العالم. وهذا هدفنا الأسمى يعني، ووجودنا يعني في هذه القاعة اليوم كي نركز ليس فقط كيف نحمي هويتنا وكيف نتحدث عن هويتنا، لكن الأهم من ذلك كيف نعطي صورة إيجابية عن هويتنا. وأنا أعتقد ليس فقط التعليم، نحن كدول وكسياسيين يجب أن لا نستسلم. يعني عندما يسمع الأشخاص الآخرون مثلا بطريقة سلبية عنا وعن مجتمعاتنا سيكون دور كل إنسان ليس دور المدرسة، إنما السياسيين أيضا عندما يذهبون ويلتقون مع السياسيين الآخرين في الدول الأخرى أن يبينوا لهم حقيقتنا، حقيقة ديننا، حقيقة ما نعيشه. لأنه للأسف يعني أنا يعني من تجربتي الشخصية وعندما سافرت لكثير من الدول من أجل يعني نشاطاتي رأيت الكثير من سوء الفهم وتحديدا يعني عن العرب وعن المسلمين. لذلك أنا لا أنتظر يعني أي شخص كي يحدث الآخرين عن الإسلام أو عن العرب، فإنما يكون دوري أنا كإنسانة عربية مسلمة أن أعطي تلك الصورة. لأن كما قلت يعني كما أسلفت أن الإنسان عندما تكون أفعاله هي يعني بطريقة صحيحة سينعكس ذلك إيجابا طبعا علينا وعلى ثقافتنا وعلى يعني أمتنا.
عروة أو العنود لو لديكم أي مشاركة في هذا السؤال.
هو بس تعقيب بسيط، يعني أنا أتفق مع مزون إنه المنهج خاصة في المواد الأدبية تقريبا مستحيل إنه يكون محايد. طيب، فالهدف إنه إحنا ننتج مناهج تعزز المواطنة العالمية، تعزز تقبل، احترام الآخرين، احترام الثقافات، بدل ما لأن المناهج ممكن مثل ما ذكر في السبوت لايت انترفيو أستاذ سيد شعيب، إنه مناهج التاريخ واللغات ممكن تستخدم كأدوات لتعزيز الصور النمطية الضارة وتعزيز النزاع وزرع البغيضة أو ضد الآخر. فعلينا انه احنا نسعى انه يكون المنهج منهج شموليه، منهج يدعو للدمج واحترام الاخرين، عشان الطفل نفسه ما يضطر انه احنا ما نساومه بين انه يختار بين هويته وانه يحصل على مهارات تساعده على تساعده في مستقبله.
وتكملة على ما ذكرته مزون أن فكرة المواد العلمية بالعكس صحيح، أظن أن حتى المواد العلمية لا تستطيع أن تكون محايدة، لأنه يقع في نهاية اليوم على فهم الطالب نفسه وعلى الطريقة التي يدرس بها المدرس المادة. ففي نهاية اليوم حتى المواد العلمية ليست محايدة، فحتى لو حاولنا أن قدر الاستطاعة أن نجعل كل المناهج محايدة وكل المناهج مبنية لتغطي كل المناطق التعليمية، يقع في نهاية اليوم في الصف نفسه على الطالب نفسه هل يستوعب هذه المواد، كيف ما هي الطريقة التي يستوعب تلك المواد. يعني حتى في تجربتي مع الجامعة عندما نأخذ نفس الصفوف كل طالب يستوعب ما يقوله الأستاذ بطريقة مختلفة وتناقش في هذا الموضوع. لهذا السبب يعني حتى في المواد العلمية لا أظن أن حتى التعليم يستطيع أن يكون محايدا.
شكرا على المشاركات المثيرة جدا للاهتمام. وأنا أوافقكم الرأي في موضوع عدم المحايدة، وأنه من الضروري بناء منهج يدعو للسلام والاندماج في عصر العولمة. وأود أن أفتح الأسئلة للحضور إن أراد أحد أن يسأل المتحدثات البارعات عن آرائهن أو عن تجاربهن أو عن أي موضوع يتطرق مع الهوية ومناطق الصراع. الأستاذ تفضل.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. قاسم إبراهيم، ناشط في حقوق الشباب في بريطانيا. والمادة اللي اتكلم عنها مهمة جدا، لأنها هي دي قلب العمل اللي بنعمل فوقه في بريطانيا بخصوص الجاليات العرب والجاليات الافرو عربية أو الأفريقية أو شمال أفريقيا، خصوصا بعض المناطق التي تحدث فيها الآن النزاعات. السؤال هو ما الحاجة، يعني ما هو الشيء الذي نقدر عليه من هذا المجتمع أن نعكس صورة معينة تكون بداية للشاب عندما يكون في تلك البلاد أو تلك المجتمع، ما يكون حاصل له نوع من الستيريوتايب، أن نكون نحن يعني خاتينه يكون بصورة معينة. لأنه دائما هل زي ما قالت الأستاذة منون، هل مسنون، معلش أعذرونا على الاسم، مزون، يس. نحن بناخذ تفكير كثير وكلام كثير عندنا بالديانة، وبننسى كثير جدا على نحن مختلفين الأعراق ومختلفين الألوان ومختلفين الحضارات. فعندما هل ننظر الآن في التعليم للحضارات ما قبل الإسلام، حضارات ما قبل الموفمنت الحاصل للعرب في هذه الأماكن، أو اللغة العربية بالتحديد. طبعا ليس هناك جنس يسمى عربي، إنما هي لغة عربية، عشان نعكس الحضارات ما قبل الإسلام لتلك الدول لكي يكون الاحترام. نقطة أخيرة، مثلا عندنا في السودان عندنا حضارة الكوش، حضارة الكمت، عندنا في العراق حضارات كثيرة جدا. عندما ندرس هذه الحضارات للأبناء، هل هذا يعزز من هويتهم أم يحد منها؟ عندما تتضارب بعض هذه الثقافة والديانات مع الإسلام، هل يجوز ذلك أم لا؟ شكرا.
هل السؤال موجه إلى أحد معين في الجلسة؟ هل يعني أروى سوف تجاوب؟
السؤال مهم جدا. للأسف هذا إثم ما بعد الاستعمار. يعني مؤتمر برلين رسم خطوط على الخريطة وقرر إنه هذه دول، وحصل الاستقلال ما بعد الاستعمار، وعلى كل واحدة من هذه الدول الآن أنها تحدد هويتها، تحدد ثقافتها، وتحدد أنه ليه هي مختلفة عن الناس اللي مثلا النوبة، جنوب مصر وشمال السودان. إيش معنى النوبي اللي جنوب مصر مختلف عن النوبي اللي شمال السودان؟ لأنه البريطانيين قرروا يعملوا خط horizontal أو أفقي، ويحددوا أنه هذه الدولة مختلفة عن هذه الدولة. هذا إرث استعماري للأسف، حتى اليوم يعد مشكلة كبيرة. لا أرى أن هناك تضاد في تدريس حضارات ما قبل الإسلام وتدريس الإسلام. هو في النهاية اضطرينا أنه إحنا نلقى شيء يشملنا كلنا في هذا الإطار الجديد اللي هو artificial أو مختلق، غير حقيقي. فالقضية بتبتدي أنه هو على قدر ما تقدر تستخدم إطار شمولي، تعليم شمولي في احترام لجميع الثقافات التاريخية ما قبل الإسلام والإسلام، وحتى ما بعد الحداثة والحداثة حتى. فهي هذه هي الطريقة، وده للأسف هو إرث استعماري. غير كذا إحنا والاتجاه حتى العالمي هو الاتجاه المواطنة العالمية أكثر من إنه أيوة في تاريخ، بس في مواطن عالمية تقبل الآخرين، وسواء كان من لاجئ أو مهاجر أو من الوطن المستضيف في حالة إعادة التوطين في البلدان الأوروبية.
هل يوجد أي أسئلة أخرى للجمهور؟ في الخلف هناك، في الخلف جدا.
السلام عليكم. رفاعة الفتاح، رئيسية الأوقاف والشؤون الدينية في الحكومة السورية المؤقتة. أولا أشكركم، الموضوع مهم والمداخلات مهمة والأسئلة مهمة. التعليم حق وهوية، ولكن أيضا هو سلاح، لأن ضياع الهوية وانتشار الجهل سيؤدي إلى فوضى، والفوضى تؤدي إلى جريمة، تؤدي إلى تطرف. وهذا الذي استطاع للأسف الكثيرين من أعداء الإنسانية استغلاله، كالبغدادي الذي حول كثير من أطفالنا إلى قتله، وبشار الأسد مجرم حول كثير من أطفالنا إلى قتله. فالتعليم ليس حق وهوية، بل هو سلاح، وهذا السلاح يجب ألا نسمح لأعداء الإنسانية استغلاله. بالنسبة للأخت موزون، حابب بس أداخل على كلام لها. هل دراسة منهج البلد المضيف هو الأفضل أم الأصل؟ حقيقة إذا كان البلد مثل الأردن وسوريا نفس الهوية ونفس اللغة والدين والتاريخ، ليس هناك فرق. ربما يكون تجربة الأخ موزون هي الأفضل. أما إذا اختلفت اللغة واختلف الدين، اختلفت القيم المجتمعية، اختلف التاريخ، حقيقة هنا خطر على الطفل أن يضيع ويتشتت هويته الأصلية. فهذا الله أعلم. يعني بالنسبة للشعوب المهجرة قسريا مثل شعوب العراق وأفغانستان وسوريا واليمن، يعني هذه تعد جريمة. للأسف حاليا التعليم العالمي للأسف يعني ليس هناك عدالة في التعليم العالمي. فالشعوب التي تم تهجيرها واستضعافها لا يعامل أطفالها كلها معاملة عادلة، إنما يعامل الأطفال وفق المصالح السياسية الدولية. فالقيم الإنسانية الأخلاقية مثل المحبة والتسامح والاحترام والتعاون والرحمة والصدق تعلم في بلدان العالم الأول. بلدان العالم الثالث ليس لها أي نصيب أو حظ. هنا السؤال للسياسيين والدول: لماذا لا يوجد عدالة في تحقيق حق التعليم والحفاظ على الهوية للأطفال حول العالم، وخاصة مناطق الصراعات والحروب؟ أختم بسؤال الأخت موزون: حسب تجربتك، هل الأطفال السوريين والعراقيين وغيرهم، الشعوب يعني التي هجر ملايين منها، الذين يعيشون اليوم في أوروبا، لن أتكلم عليهم ولكن سأقول أبناؤهم، أبناء الأطفال، هل سيحافظون على هويتهم؟ شكرا.
طبعا شكرا جزيلا يعني على تعليقك. في الحقيقة يعني أصعب ما يواجهه الإنسان هو عيشه يعني في مكان يختلف كليا عن المكان الذي ولد فيه، يختلف عن ثقافته، يختلف يعني عن نمط حياته. فأنا يعني عندما عشت في المملكة المتحدة وجدت الفرق الكبير. يعني عندما كنت في الأردن لم يكن يوجد أي فرق حقيقة، لأننا كما قلت نملك نفس الهوية ونملك نفس يعني التاريخ وما إلى ذلك. لكن عندما يأتي الأمر إلى أوروبا فيوجد تحدي كبير، وتقع يعني مسؤولية كبيرة على الفرد نفسه أن يحافظ على هويته، لأنه لا يوجد أي شخص سيقول لك حافظ على هويتك. إذا كنت تريد أن تحافظ على هويتك يجب أن تحافظ عليها بنفسك، من خلال ثقافتك، من خلال معرفتك، من خلال تمكنك من يعني العلم الذي سيمكنك من مواجهة الآخرين وتحدثك بقوة عن يعني الثقافة التي أنت تملكها. يعني تعلمي مثلا في دولة أخرى لا يعني أنني سأتخلى عن هويتي، بالعكس تماما. أنا حاليا عندما أدرس في الجامعة وألتقي مع الكثير من الناس الذين لديهم طبعا نظرة سلبية عن ديني وعن يعني ثقافتي، أنا أوضح لهم، يعني أبين لهم، أنا لا أسمح لهم طبعا أن يتحدثوا بشكل سلبي ولا أتدخل ولا أتكلم. فمثلا في الجامعة عندما نكون في نقاش وطبعا هم يتحدثون كثيرا يعني عن الإسلام ونظرتهم سلبية تماما، فأنا هنا يقع على عاتقي أن أبين لهم الحقيقة. فالإنسان عندما يتعلم في مكان آخر هذا لا يعني أنه تقمص يعني ثقافة الآخر أو تبناها أو أصبحت هويته. والعائلة أيضا التي ينتمي إليها ذلك الطفل الذي يعيش في أوروبا أو في أي مكان في العالم، يعني أوروبا ليست هي المكان الوحيد الذي يختلف عنا، فيوجد كثير من الدول لديها ثقافتها، لديها تاريخها، وطبعا نحن لا نفرض عليهم أن يتبنوا ثقافتنا، لكن في نفس الوقت لا نسمح لهم أن يسيئوا لنا أو يسيئوا إلى هويتنا. لذلك وجودنا بينهم وفي مدارسهم وفي جامعاتهم هو فرصة ذهبية لنا كي نبين لهم من نحن، فنبين لهم الحقيقة. إذا انعزلنا عنهم ودرسنا في مكان مختلف عنهم لا يوجد تعايش هنا بين الشعوب. لكن عندما أنا أندمج مع ذلك الشخص الأوروبي، عندما أبين له، فإنني في هذا المجال أساهم أصلا في إثراء يعني هويتي وفي إثراء ثقافتي، في تعليمهم عنا، لأن لديهم الكثير من سوء الفهم. فهذه مسؤوليتي أنا كشخص أن أبين للعالم من أنا. يعني كما قلت طبعا أنا من تجربتي تحدثت عن المنهج الأردني، لكن أنا يعني ليس لدي أي مشكلة أن أتعلم في أي لغة أو في أي دولة، لأنني أعتبرها أنا شخصيا، يعني طبعا كل إنسان له يعني وجهة نظر مختلفة، فأنا أعتبرها فرصة كي أبين لهم، وخصوصا في أماكن يعني مثل أوروبا التي تحمل يعني كثير يعني من الأفكار السلبية للأسف عنا. فهو دورنا ليس دوري فقط كفرد، وإنما دور دولنا، يعني الدول العربية يقع عليها عاتق في تبيين وتوضيح هذه الهوية، وأن لا نسمح لأي أحد أن يقلل من شأننا ولا يقلل يعني من هويتنا ولا من ديننا، لأننا مسؤولون، وهذا يعني دورنا ومسؤوليتنا الكبرى كي يعني نبين للعالم. وأيضا عندما نتحدث طبعا عن اللاجئين، يعني السوريون عانوا كثيرا، العراقيون عانوا كثيرا وعانينا، لكن المعاناة دائما يأتي منها الأمل، وما دام الأمل موجود، ما دمنا يعني نحن مصممون على تحقيق النجاح، مصممون على الحصول على أهدافنا، لا يوجد أي شيء يعني أن يقف في طريقنا. وكما ذكرت طبعا دائما يعني إذا أراد أي شخص أن يهدم أمة يبدأ في التعليم، لأنه يعلم أن التعليم هو السلاح، وعندما يفقد هذا السلاح سيتم تدمير ذلك المجتمع. نعم القتل يحاول الكثيرون يعني عن طريق القتل أن يهدموا هويات ويهدموا دول، لكن يعلمون حقيقة أنهم عندما يستهدفون التعليم هم في هذه اللحظة سيهدمون تلك الأمة. لذلك أينما فقد التعليم فقد يعني الفرصة لكي نحافظ على هويتنا. وطبعا نحن يعني لنا خير مثال في ديننا، وأول ما نزل على رسولنا الكريم يعني عليه الصلاة والسلام هو اقرأ، ليدلنا أن هذا الدين أتى من علم ومعرفة، وأن كل شيء موجود في هذا الدين مبني على حقائق وليس يعني على كلام أو وما إلى ذلك. لذلك عندما نقتدي يعني في هذا الدين العظيم نقتدي بالعلم والمعرفة، فإننا نستطيع أن نعرف قيمة العلم. ومن دون علم يعني أنا من الأشخاص الذين يؤمنون بقوة أن التعليم يعني هو الحل الأمثل لمواجهة كل التحديات. يعني العلم يبني بيوتا لا عماد لها، والجهل يهدم بيوت العز والكرامة. لذلك العلم هو طريقنا، وأتمنى طبعا أن يعم السلام في جميع دول العالم وعلى وطني، وأن نستطيع يعني أن نساهم في بنائه وازدهار يعني أوطاننا
شكرا على مداخلتك مزون. يوجد سؤال من سعادة السيدة لولو الخاطر.
شكرا جزيلا ثناء. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. شاكرة للجميع أصحاب السعادة يعني استمرارهم معنا في هذه الجلسات، وهذا أكبر دليل على اهتمامهم. أشكر الجماعة، أشكر العنود، أشكر مزون، أشكر أروى، وأشكر جميع المشاركين. الحقيقة تعليق سريع إذا سمحتم لي، وبعد ذلك سؤال سريع كذلك. من المفاهيم اللي أظن لابد أن ننظر لها هنا عندما يتعلق الموضوع بمسألة الهوية هي فكرة moving identities، يعني الهويات المتحركة. الهويات تتحرك في الزمن، هوية نفس المجتمع في نفس المكان خلال 50 سنة أو 100 سنة قد تحدث عليها تغيرات. ومن ثم هناك البعد الآخر وهو بعد المكان، فكرة تحرك الهوية عبر المكان، الزمان، المكان، وكذلك المفاهيم. وهناك دراسات كثيرة في مجال الهوية الآن تتحدث عن فكرة الموفينج ايدنتيتيز، لأنه مع تطور التكنولوجيا ومع حركة الهجرة المستمرة، ليس بالضرورة اللجوء ولكن الهجرة بشكل عام وانفتاح العالم على بعضه البعض، وهذا التداخل الشديد خلق مفاهيم جديدة لم تكن موجودة سابقا. والحقيقة أعود لزميلنا الذي سأل عن مسألة الدين والحضارات القديمة. هل يمكن أن ترفع؟ نعم أراك الآن. من الذي كان يقول تكلم حتى أراك؟ هل هو سقراط؟ أظنه كذلك. وقد تكلمت. سؤالك في محله. ماذا ندرس؟ وهذا يعود إلى مسألة مكونات الهوية. اللغة، الدين، ما هي المكونات؟ لابد أن نطرح هذه المسألة. أعتقد أن مفتاحا للإجابة على سؤالك هو التالي: أننا لابد أن نفرق بين دراسة التاريخ من حيث هو تاريخ واستدعاؤه عقديا وثقافيا واجتماعيا. مشكلة كثير منا أنهم لا يتعاملون مع التاريخ من حيث هو تاريخ، وإنما يستدعونه إلى حاضرنا، ثم يبنون عليه مجموعة من المفاهيم، ثم يبنون عليه نمطا معينا من السلوك. لكننا لو درسنا الحضارة مثلا الآشورية أو الحضارة الفرعونية أو أي حضارة من الحضارات من حيث هي تاريخ وتراث، لا أظن أنها ستتعارض بالضرورة. لكن طبعا كانت هناك دعوات في بداية القرن العشرين ونهاية القرن التاسع عشر لإحياء بعض الحضارات القديمة بديلا للهوية. طه حسين كتب وتراجع بعد ذلك في هذه المسألة وغيره كذلك. فأظن أننا لابد أن نفرق بين ما هو عقدي أيضا وما هو ثقافي. هذا مفتاح مهم للإجابة على هذه الأسئلة. أحيانا نستدعي كثيرا من المفاهيم وهي مفاهيم ثقافية، ولكننا نستدعيها استدعاء عقائديا، وبالتالي نسبغ عليها سمة الاستمرارية والإطلاق، في حين أنها نسبية، كما أن مفهوم الثقافة هو مفهوم نسبي. سؤالي كان هذا هو كانت هذه هي نهاية تعليقي. سؤالي لعلكم ركزتم على مسألة، يعني أنا أرى أن عنوان الجلسة أقرأها الآن بالعربية: سياسة التعليم في مناطق النزاع. ليس بالضرورة، يعني نحن نتكلم عن اللاجئين، ماذا عن المقيمين في مكان فيه نزاع؟ يعني هل هناك عمل في هذا المجال؟ وأوجه كلامي لأختي أروى والأختي العنود بحكم أنكما تعملان في هذا المجال في مناطق النزاع، وطبعا تحياتي دائما لمزون لا شك.
على سبيل المثال تعمل منظمة التعليم فوق الجميع في يوغندا، ويوغندا هي ثالث أكبر دولة مستضيفة للاجئين من النزاعات العنصرية والإثنية في مثل السودان وكونغو. فيوغندا هناك تتواجد من الأساس توترات بين اللاجئين القدامى، اللاجئين الجدد والمقيمين نفسهم. فحاولت منظمة التعليم فوق الجميع بالتعامل مع شركات مثل وايت تيكر وارتولوشن أن تقوم ببرامج التي تدمج بين كل تلك المجتمعات المختلفة، لأن كما ذكرتي هناك تتواجد توترات وصعب جدا أن تحلي هذه التوترات، لأن تصعب على اللاجئين الجدد بالاندماج والانخراط في المجتمع الجديد، وتصعب أيضا على المجتمع المستضيف أن يستقبلهم. فهذا ما نراه أيضا في أوروبا مع اللاجئين السوريين والعرب. فحاولت قدر المستطاع أن تقوم بحل مبتكر وفريد من نوعه في عبر بالذات الفن والرياضة، بالتكلم والتواصل مع هذه النقطة. فهذا شيء بالعكس نراه بالذات في يجب هذه الحلول أن تزداد أيضا، بالذات ليست فقط في يوغندا ودول أفريقية بل أيضا في الدول الأوروبية التي أيضا تفشل في استيعاب ثقافيا اللاجئين والمقيمين العرب.
بالنسبة للمقيمين في مناطق النزاع، يمكن أكبر مشكلة تواجههم عادة سواء في الكوارث الطبيعية أو عند اندلاع الحروب تستخدم المدارس كإمرجنسي شلتر
بعتذر حماية في وقت
مؤخرا. فهذا طبعا يسبب يعني معلش أنا بعتذر العربي بتاعي انتهى قبل 10 دقائق. فبيسبب مشاكل بالنسبة لسلسلة التعليم بالنسبة للطفل، يعني تعليمه لأنه مدرسته الآن تستخدم كمكان لحماية الناس اللي هاربين من حرب أو هاربين من كارثة معينة، هو لا يستطيع الذهاب للمدرسة. فمدرسة مثلا تتوقف لمدة شهور أو ساعات سنين وهم مقيمين، هم ما نزحوا، هم لسه في مكانهم، بس تعليمهم توقف لأنه المدارس استخدمت كشلترز مؤقتة. فدائما في بندعو دائما انه يكون في حلول بديله لاستخدام المدارس كشلترز، ان المدارس ما تستخدم كشلترز عشان الناس حتى لما يكونوا قاعدين في نفس مكانهم ما يضطروا انه ينزحوا، تعليمهم ما يتاثر بالنسبه للاطفال. برضو من المشاكل اللي بتواجه الاطفال الموجودين من غير النازحين والمقيمين في حالات النزاع هم الاطفال المجندين. هو موضوع حساس جدا، معظم الحكومات ما بتتكلم عنه. معظم الدول المانحة وبرامج التعليمية ما بتغطي الأطفال المجندين. ليه؟ لأنه معيار النجاح مشروع للأطفال المجندين، مشاريع التسريح ونزع السلاح وإعادة الإدماج، نسبة أو معيار قياس النجاح غير سهل ومداه طويل جدا جدا. يعني انت عشان تقرر انه والله فعلا حصل للطفل ادماج وتم تسريحه وانه الطفل المجند خلاص صار طفل عادي، ياخذ وقت طويل جدا جدا. الدول المانحه والبرامج المانحه دائما بتبحث عن حلول او برامج سريعه. المعيار سهل، تم بناء 20 فصل، تم توزيع 10,000 حقيبة مدرسية، بس برامج التسريح والأطفال المجندين لا تدعم بشكل جاد. فبنلقى مشكلة بتاعت هوية بالنسبة للأطفال المجندين. في برنامج التسريح ينظر إليه كطفل أو كمجند سابق، في المدرسة يطالب بأنه يكون طفل طبيعي. فالطفل مسكين اللي هو المجند السابق يكون عنده مشكلة في الهوية ما بين أنه في ازدواجية، انه انا مجند سابق ولا انا طفل عادي، ويعامل بطريقتين مختلفتين. فضمن الحاجات اللي للاسف تواجه المقيمين الموجودين في دول النزاع ولا تنظر وبرامجها لا يعني لا يستثمر فيها ولا يهتم فيها بشكل عام.
شكرا على السؤال وعلى الأجوبة، أضاف أفق مهم جدا في هذا النقاش. إن كان يوجد أي سؤال أخير لأن الوقت قد انتهى. الأخ.
سؤال أخير بس، طارق حسن من اليمن. طبعا أنا أشكرك على الملاحظة الرهيبة هذه، لأنه إحنا في اليمن نعاني من هذا الشيء على فكرة. إحنا في اليمن عندنا نزوح داخلي كبير جدا، وطبعا المدرسين عندنا في اليمن الرواتب شبه متوقفة تبعهم يعني، فعندنا أطفال مجندين وأطفال مسرحين يعني في أمور كثيرة جدا. أنا سؤالي هو من اسم الورشة نفسه كما قالت الأخت أولى الخاطر، هو ما هي الدول أو ما هي الجهات التي احنا ممكن نعود لها إنها تعمل سياسات للتعليم في دول النزاع، أو ما هي الجهات اللي احنا ممكن كشباب نعود لها، أو ما هي الجهة اللي ممكن إن احنا نستند إلى مراجع إنه تمتلك سياسة للتعليم في مناطق النزاع مثل اليمن مثل سوريا، خصوصا للنازحين اللي هم نازحين داخليا غير الإميجرنتس اللي هم مسافرين في الخارج. شكرا.
إن كان يوجد أحد يريد.
شكرا جزيلا. طبعا يعني هذا سؤال متشعب وصعب. بما يخص يعني دعم التعليم في مناطق النزاع يكون يعني الأصعب. أولا بسبب انعدام الأمن، يعني كثير من المنظمات الدولية أو يعني المنظمات يعني منفصلة أيضا عن المجتمع الدولي الخاصة عندما تقوم بإنشاء أو التفكير حتى بدعم التعليم في تلك الأماكن فهي يعني تشعر بالخوف، لأنهم يعلمون أن المدرسة إذا بنيناها ستدمر. على سبيل المثال أنا إذا أردت أن أجهز كوادر تعليمية، هذه الكوادر ربما تتعرض للخطر. فهذه أمور يعني ينظر لها الكثيرون عندما يفكرون عن مناطق النزاع. لكن ما أعتقده هو جميع الدول يقع عليها مسؤولية، وخصوصا الأمم المتحدة طبعا والمجتمع الدولي ككل يجب أن يضافروا جهودهم وأن يعملوا معا، وطبعا أن يتخذوا خطوات جدية. يعني ليس فقط أن يقوموا بمؤتمرات وندوات أو التحدث. نحن للأسف نرى الكثير يعني من الكلام حول مناطق النزاع أو إحصائيات وأرقام، قتل عدد كذا في دولة معينة وعانى كذا وكذا، ولكن للأسف نهمل الأمر الأهم وهو يعني تغيير الوضع. يعني للأسف كثير من السياسيين لا يفكرون بجدية في إنهاء الصراعات مثل اليمن وسوريا. يعني سوريا حاليا 9 سنوات تقارب 10 سنوات، يعني عقد كامل من المعاناة والألم والتدمير والتشريد. داخل سوريا مثلا الآن محافظة إدلب تقصف وتدمر، الأطفال يشردون، حتى لا يوجد منازل، ليس مدارس، منزل يقي الطفل يعني من حر الصيف وبرد الشتاء لا يوجد. يعني حتى أحيانا الطفل الأمن وهو أهم يعني شيء في الحياة، يعني أنا أكون آمنة، لا يوجد هذا الحق للكثير من الأطفال. لذلك أتمنى من السياسيين في العالم أن حقا يعني أن ينهوا تلك الصراعات، لأنه يجب أن نقول يكفي لهذا الألم. الألم ليس فقط كلام، يعني لا يعرف الألم حقا إلا الشخص الذي يعانيه ويجربه. فأولئك الأطفال يعني عانوا كثيرا، وحان الوقت طبعا يعني أن نعطيهم فرصة في العيش بأمان كجميع الأطفال في العالم، لأن الطفل لا ذنب له أو الإنسان ككل. يعني كل إنسان يعني له الحق في الحياة. الله سبحانه وتعالى عندما أعطانا هذه الحياة أعطانا إياها كي نعيش وليس لنموت، فالأصل في الحياة هو أن نعيش وليس أن نموت. لذلك هذا ما يجب أن يركز عليه الكثيرون الذين لا يركزون على الأمن ولا يركزون على السلام ولا يركزون على الأطفال. لذلك حان الوقت حقا أن يتخذ هذا العالم الخطوات اللازمة لإنهاء الحروب والصراعات. أعلم أن تبدأ حرب سهل جدا، لكن أن ننهي حرب هو الأمر الأصعب. وأنا لا أريد طبعا أن أحمل الناس المسؤولية قبل أن أتكلم عن نفسي، لكن أنا لا أستطيع أن أقوم بكل شيء لوحدي أو أي إنسان لوحده. لذلك كل إنسان يستطيع أن يساهم، لكن لا يستطيع أن يحقق كل شيء. لذلك دائما أقول أن يعني تضافر الجهود، العمل معا هو السبيل الأمثل لإنهاء أي مشكلة في العالم.
أعلم أن المشكلة في الوقت، بس إضافة سريعة. هي مسؤولية متشاركة بالتأكيد. أهم عنصر فيها ننظر للنازحين نفسهم اللاجئين نفسهم كsource of information source of information مصدر. لما نصنفهم كضحايا فقط احنا بناخذ منهم كرامتهم الإنسانية، بنظن انه احنا لسبب ما عندنا كل المعلومات وعارفين شنو الحل الأمثل لهم. بس انت لو فعلا محتاج تعرف احتياجاتهم وتصمم برامج أو تعليمية مناسبة تنظر لهم كأصحاب حق وتعطيهم مشاركة وتأخذ ما يقولونه بعين الاعتبار فعلا في تصميم البرامج التعليمية.
شكرا جزيلا على هذه المداخلات وهذه الآراء المهمة جدا، وهذا الموضوع مهم جدا، وأتمنى أن بعد 50 سنة أن تكونوا حضرتكم من صناع القرار في هذا الموضوع. وأشكر الحضور وسعادتكم الحضور لسماع هذا النقاش، وشكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much for that engaging panel. It seems it was very popular with everyone, many questions. We'll be moving on to our final panel as the spotlight interview with Mazoun Al Hassan will be taking place outside. And before we move on to the last panel, we have another video to share with everyone.
But like it hasn't changed my life yet. Isn't it supposed to change my life in the next 4 years? I think even the smallest amount of education makes a difference.
It opens you to a completely different world and different cultures.
Is life-changing. It's necessary
Like, it's like the basic of your grooming.
to figure out who you want to be and who you are.
So I think you are what you study, what you read, what you watch.
We live in a world filled with biases, and education helps us navigate through those biases.
And be able to critically analyze it and understand it and question it.
Becoming open and welcome to different opinions.
Make you question a lot of things that you just take it for granted every day.
And it gives you a model of how you can improve yourself and improve the environment that you live in.
I love learning, and I can't imagine my life without it.
And now we move straight to our final session, and we invite Hamida Darzadeh, the Education Above All advocate, to moderate the session on Uprooting Radicalism. Is Education the Answer?
Right, so hello and welcome everyone to the third panel for today on radicalism and the role of education. So I'd like to first start by two main points, one on the process of radicalization and two on the role of education. So whether based on race, religion, or politics, extremism poses a particular threat to youth, and educators are the cornerstone of current efforts to prevent the most vulnerable young individuals from becoming radicalized. And radicalism is a two-stage process. And it's in the first stage that a vulnerable individual start to possess extremist ideas and views. And these vulnerabilities are influenced by an individual's background and their experiences. And the second stage of radicalism would involve that these extremist views are then turned into violent action and behavior by the individual. So education acts as an opportunity within both of these stages of radicalism to support the young people and protect them against violent and extremist narratives and ideologies. So during the times of social transformation and growing diversity, when exclusive and rigid identities become very attractive, extremist movements exploit such identities and promote narratives of us versus them. So this would lead to devaluation and dehumanization against those people who are framed as the other. So schools would play a crucial role in educating these young people to develop critical thinking and become resilient to violent ideologies, irrespective of their socioeconomic, religious, or ethnic background. So surprisingly, education has been leveraged to both radicalize and to de-radicalize young people. And governments in conflict-affected areas are interested in financing measures that counter violent extremism as part of education program. So with this note, I would like to now turn to our panelists. So please join me in welcoming our panelists for this session. So our first panelist is Mr. Ibrahim. Ibrahim is a senior advisor to the State Ministry for Peace in Afghanistan and the former acting mayor of Kabul. Our second panelist is Mr. Meysa Karak. She's a Turkish politician and a member of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, and the youngest member of parliament in Turkey and Asia, as well as the second youngest member of parliament in the world.
So our third panelist is Ms. Khansa Maria. Khansa Maria is, of course, a fellow Georgetown student and a disability rights activist and founder of Hope for Tomorrow. I would like to open the discussion by asking my first question to Rumeysa. So my first question to you is that, can education help in a global race for the suppression of violent extremism? And what should be done to prevent youth from becoming radicalized?
So when we look at the radicalized people, by the way, today I won't be addressing people who are forced to extremism or who are forced to radicalization. As you may know, for example, terrorist PKK forced children at the age of 6, 7, and 8 to they arm them and they turn them into suicide bombers. So these are not what I will be addressing today. I will mostly address people who are manipulated and radicalized. So when we look at them, we see young people who are mostly disadvantaged, who are unemployed. Very small number of them are like doctors or they're like highly educated. Most of them are unemployed. And most of them are uneducated. So why, if you ask why, because it's really easy to manipulate people who don't have decent education. So education, for this instance, for this reason, plays a really important role to educate young people to think critically, to criticize, to express themselves, to giving them the equal opportunities is really important. But at the same time, I don't believe that education is 100% solution for radicalization. We see a terrorist leader, Baghdadi, leader of terrorist ISIS, he had a PhD. So education is not the only key here, but I do believe that teaching children how to criticize, how to build arguments, how to express themselves, giving them equal opportunities in terms of education do bring so much effectiveness in order to prevent extremism.
Thank you for highlighting the role of education and how education can be actually used to radicalize as well as de-radicalize children. In this note, I would like to turn to our second panelist, Shoaib. So extremism exploits social emotional needs and challenges linked to broader questions of identity, belonging, and lack of prospects. Do you see any connection between poverty, education, and terrorism?
Very much, there's direct connection. I think the term belonging, which you mentioned, is very, very important. A lot of times what we see, coming from a country which has unfortunately been the victim of a lot of radical movements and radical interpretations of religion, I think what is important is that a lot of the vulnerable youth who are recruited, unfortunately, do not have a sense of belonging, not to their families, not to their communities, not to the broader society. And recruiters, what they provide a sense of belonging and purpose. And so poverty, of course, lack of opportunities, being destitute, not having hope for the future plays an important role. But I think education is also important in making sure that there's a sense of belonging for that person in that community. And if that's a notion that we empower and we strengthen, we will make it harder and harder for radical groups to recruit and to sway the younger population to move in such a radical and in such a destructive direction. So there's a direct link between education, but it's also the type and the content of what we teach, which determines the fate of whether or not somebody is more prone to radical movements or not.
I certainly agree with the fact that poverty certainly plays a role in this, that it actually hinders the access, to education for certain people who can't afford going to schools, and also the fact that when you have less, income and resources, the quality of education becomes also a problem, and how that you might not be able to have access to certain quality schools. So then poverty actually would result to not just access, in fact, not just access to education, but also the quality of education that you're getting. And on my notes on quality of education, I would like to turn now to Ms. Khansa Maria. So Khansa, many extremist groups have their roots in identity-based politics, and they mobilize support based on perceived grievances. So what impact do you think inclusion has on preventing extremist ideas from developing in the society?
Thank you for that question. So basically, let's understand what inclusion is. So inclusion is basically being able to understand all the narratives around you, accept people with different characteristics, people with different perspectives, people following different ideologies, and people who look different to you. Why do we need to make our education systems more inclusive? Because education isn't just about rote learning. It's not just about learning how to be the best doctor or the best engineer or the best lawyer. I think education is a lot more than that. As we say in Georgetown, education is about cura personalis, which is educating the entire person. So not just catering to what their needs are in terms of career, but also educating the whole person, thinking of how we can make them grow emotionally, thinking of how we can make them grow physically. So taking care of all those aspects of their life. So I think inclusion and just acceptance gives those people a more understanding community and a more tolerant outlook on life. So if, of course, if our education systems are more inclusive, they will not be pushed towards these radicalist ideologies. As Shoaib also mentioned, why do these people go to these radical groups? Because they don't feel a sense of belonging, because they feel isolated and they feel marginalized because they have a different perspective, they look different, they may act different or follow different customs. So if we make our education systems more inclusive, I feel that we can make them feel more including and included, and we can make them feel like they're a part of the society and therefore not push them towards these radical elements.
I can certainly relate on actually what you said on inclusivity and the importance of inclusive education. Because I remember my own personal experience when I was back in an Iranian school here, and I was always discriminated against based on my ethnicity and based on the fact that I came from Balochistan. And I was always considered the backward, and this really impacted me personally because I always felt that I had no voice and that I self-censored myself. And it was only when I actually went to university here with over 60 plus nationalities in which I felt that diversity was certainly celebrated and diversity was part of the education that I was getting, in which I felt that I was part of the community. So I think in terms of providing an inclusive education certainly would help the person to grow and thrive as a young person. And I think as young people, that's what we need. And on this note, I would like to turn to Romesa. And I know earlier you have discussed the role of education. And I wanted to mention that Turkey hosts the largest number of refugees in the world. So what has been some of the efforts made by Turkey to actually include the young people in terms of the educational opportunities provided to them?
So we have 4 million Syrian refugees right now in Turkey. And 1.7 million of them are Syrian children. And 1 million of them are the children at school age. So one of the biggest initiatives that we had in Turkey was with the cooperation with UN. So we helped, I think it was more than 500,000 children to go to school with their expenses covered. And with monthly payment to their families in order to motivate the families to send their children to schools too. So our government, our Turkish government has always been very certain with that. Our priority in the refugee cases has always been education, because we believe that in order to save the children, it's not only giving them a space to live, it's also giving them a hope for their future, for their countries, for the world. Giving them a purpose in the society, giving them opportunities as the other children living in our country and living in the world. So apart from that, but I could also mention the challenges, because it was a huge challenge. We're talking about 1 million children here, and we had to have a space for 1 million children in Turkey, additional to our Turkish citizens. So we needed extra classes, we needed extra teachers, we needed extra materials, and it was a huge challenge, of course. But I can say proudly that 2 years ago we have settled a new system. Now Syrian people, Syrian children, they do have education with Turkish children. And they're all together now in the same setting, in the same schools, giving the same opportunities, because we don't see discrimination. We don't believe in discrimination in education according to anyone's races, anyone's economical background, or anything. We believe that every children deserve an equal opportunity in education, and we will fight for it as long as we can.
Thank you for your insight on the Turkish experience. So I would like to turn to Shoaib and also ask you, what are the challenges that Afghanistan faces in terms of radicalization and prevention of extremism among youth?
Thank you for that question. Before I get to it, I'd just like to thank and commend that attitude that Turkey has in terms of allowing and empowering education to refugees, especially the Syrian community. I was among the Afghan community who had to live and grow up outside of Afghanistan because of the war. And it was very difficult to get to school. It was very difficult to get to a decent school or a good school. And a lot of people, unfortunately, were not able to do so and are still not able to do so. So having that access in those important years gives you the opportunity to then express yourself. And so a lot of those Syrian kids down the line would benefit from this policy. So coming to your question, I think one of the biggest challenges is that we have the challenge of governance during an ongoing conflict. We have an ongoing conflict in our cities and our provinces, and we have to deliver education services, schools, pay the teachers, make sure the schools are well equipped. So it becomes a bit of an issue of being focused on the very minimum of what's possible. We have less and less bandwidth, policymakers and decision makers have less and less bandwidth and patience and time to think about, oh, okay, so what is actually in these books? Are they the most modern pedagogical techniques that we can be using? And I think that's important, because even though you might have a building and you might have teachers and pay them salaries, but if the content and substance of what you teach those kids isn't, based on 21st century, isn't necessarily equipping them, giving them the right tools, then we're still falling back. So in Afghanistan, that bit is the challenge. The ongoing conflict is restricting the government's ability, in general our ability, to be able to give quality education. That's why non-government initiatives like Charmax, the mobile bus library, and other initiatives become so important, because they try to fill a gap which the government has not been able to address because of the ongoing conflict.
Yeah, so I agree with you on the fact that given that Afghanistan is in an ongoing war, and the fact that in the conflict-affected areas, when the role of education, when the role of international law becomes weak, and when human rights are violated, then education, I feel like, becomes a very key factor to prevent radicalization. And also, I would like to mention some of the role of international organizations. For example, the current organization that I work in, Education About All, they have a program called Education in Security and Conflict. And what they did this year, actually, they went to one of the largest settlements of refugees in Uganda, and they had interactive sessions and workshops on human rights as well as peace building. So the role of international organizations actually is quite important. So Khansa, let me get back to you on the fact that you've already mentioned how inclusivity plays a role. And so my question to you would be, how do we restructure education system to be more inclusive?
So that's a great question. I think the idea really is inclusivity is something that we sometimes often forget when we are talking about restructuring the education system, or when we are talking about rehabilitating refugees, providing them with better opportunities. Because people with disabilities are often marginalized, and even talking about the term disability is a taboo subject. I grew up in a society which is not only predominantly patriarchal but also marginalizes people with disabilities. So I think education has played a very major role in giving me a voice to advocate for disability rights and advocate for those whose voices are often not heard. So I think we need to restructure the education system not only on a grassroots level, where providing things like accommodations, where ensuring that people who have different learning needs aren't marginalized by the system and are given equal opportunities to shine through in whatever they feel comfortable with or whatever they feel that their talent is. So that's, there are multiple steps to it. The first there is, of course, ensuring that we get rid of our societal taboos, where if one person doesn't become a doctor or an engineer or goes into the STEM field, we feel that that's maybe an inferior field. So maybe getting rid of those mindsets is the first step, ensuring that vocational education is also accessible to people who need it, and also ensuring that children in conflict areas who may have disabilities or who may have additional learning needs are not forgotten in the larger picture or the larger structure of the education system. So ideally being the keyword there, we'd like to get to a point where people with disabilities or people with different learning needs aren't the second thought, aren't the last thought. They're being considered while educational policies are being made. They're being considered while they go into the classroom. So I think that point might be far off, but if we work together on a global level, and if organizations make sure that this is their priority and not the second or third priority, we make these education systems more inclusive on a grassroots level.
So this actually brings me to my next question. I'll first pose it to Shoaib, and then everyone else can comment on this question. So experts state that children and young people were taught to handle conflict in a peaceful way, who have been supported and guided in their identity development, and who feel their voices are heard are less likely to fall a victim of socially harmful propaganda. So who do you believe are the main actors to equip children and young people with those skills, and what are the key strategies to achieve the positive result?
So teachers, parents, those are the main actors. But I think the problem you alluded to is much more deeper. We live, when I say we, I say the general Eastern Islamic civilization. We have very communal societies. Keeping the name of the family, the name of the father, and the tradition is very, very important. And you compare it to, let's say, more individualistic societies in the West. I think the challenge has become that our schooling systems and our families are still trying to hold on to that very dear notion of tradition, not going with the times, not adapting, not being creative, not using their imagination to reform education in a way where a person growing up in a traditionally cultural family, this part of the globe, does not feel disconnected with the modern European Western trends. So because they don't do that, we have cases where children at home are very traditional. They wear their traditional clothes. They say the things their parents want to hear. But outside, when away from the eyes of their parents and society, they become into something else. They turn to characters and personalities that are more perhaps Western and not so much Eastern. So I think the actors are important, but we have to recognize that families in, let's say, Islamic families or Eastern general communal societies need to give gradually and with deliberation, need to give more space for individual expression, should not suppress questioning and criticism, or you don't have the right to question this culture or that tradition, this is frowned upon, that is frowned upon, and slowly embrace the idea and that it's okay to be different. It's okay that this person doesn't think like you, doesn't walk like you, doesn't look like you, doesn't talk like you. That's okay. And once you recognize that, then you try to engage the world from a different prism and from a different lens. And I think, unfortunately, I still feel that that is one of the biggest differences between, just the education system and just the general societal differences between the East and the West. And I think we need to slowly adapt. If we do that, then I think we might have a shot at this.
Thank you for mentioning some of the important actors. So, Rumaisa, as a policymaker, do you think that policymakers play an important role in this?
I do believe that this is actually all of our responsibility. So, raising children in a way that they can express themselves, they can feel the belonging to the society, they can find themselves and their roles in the society. I think this responsibility belongs to all of us, to the parents, to the teachers, to the states, and everyone, every individual in the society. But if you ask me as a policymaker in terms of policies, I do believe that integral policies and also foreign policies, they do play a huge role for the radicalization of young people. For example, the first example that comes to my mind is Kurdish people in Syria or in Iraq. They were not able to speak their own languages. This is a huge problem. They were not even able to get their IDs in those areas. Even to criticize my own country before this government, we were not able to, Kurdish people in my country, they were not able to speak in Kurdish. Can you believe that? They were not able to give Kurdish names to their children. They were not even able to sing in Kurdish. This is not acceptable. This is not humane. So if we don't have human-centric policies, both internally and also externally, we actually, I think, we make those people easy to be manipulated and to be radicalized. We don't have those inhumane policies right now after this government, but I think every country and every policymaker, and I do see all of you as change makers, every change maker should be careful not to have double standards, to have human-centered policies and human rights as the interest in every point of our lives.
Khansa, what do you think on some of the comments mentioned by Shoaib and also the policies that Rumaisa just mentioned as a youth?
So I completely agree with Rumaisa. I think the responsibility to educate each other falls on all of us. Firstly, I don't think it's a process which you can finish at any point in time. I don't think that, by high school you're an educated person and you can live your life. I think it's a lifelong process. I think even when you're 90 years old, you probably have something new to learn. So I think keeping an open mind to the fact that learning is a lifelong process and being open to the lessons that everyone has to teach around us, even if they look different, they act different, they hold different ideologies, is something that we all must remember. And I think we need to be more mindful because the responsibility isn't just for a parent or a student or a teacher. I think that, in fact, we probably learn more from things that are around us that aren't formally taught to us in a math class. So I think that keeping an open mind and learning from a young age to value diversity and learning from a young age to help each other learn and grow, no matter what our strengths or limitations might be, are the key things.
So I think one another important actor that I can actually think of is the role that youth workers play in this regard, because they already know how to approach the young people and they can engage with them on programs that would be based on participation and that would be based on participation and active citizenship that would be promoted through these programs. So I think youth themselves can also have an important role in this, because if they are part of the decision-making process, and if they are not just identified as victims, that can actually empower the youth because they have a role to play with this. And to conclude this, I wanted to ask Rumeisa that what role do young people play in Turkey in terms of the decision-making mechanisms?
I think it's really important to have young people in decision-making mechanisms, but I don't believe that we should refer to young people and women only with their age and with their gender. Having young people and women on decision-making just because they're women or just because they're young, I don't believe this is true. I believe we are more than our dates of birth, we are more than our genders. So I think, I actually wonder myself, I'm always referred with my gender or with my age in every meeting almost. I wonder, when am I going to be referred as any other politicians in my country? Or in other countries, they always put you in with titles. That's not really what I want to be on the table with. I want to be on the table with my decisions. I want to be on the table because I deserve to be there, because I contribute a lot to the table, not because I'm young or because I'm women. So we had a referendum in Turkey to enable young people aging from 18 to join politics. This is how I ended up being a politician. So we have 8 young MPs right now in the parliament. I am the youngest of them, but I don't really want to be known as the youngest. I want to be known as the person who takes risks. I want to be known as the person who solves problems. I want to be known as the person who actually takes action, not just the days and the years I spent in this planet. So I really hope we can all achieve the things that we want to achieve in life and contribute a lot to others people's lives too.
Given the limited time that we have, I'll get back to you later, Khansa and Shoaib. So I would now like to open the panel to questions from the audience. So raise your hand if you have any questions.
Assalamu alaikum. It's me again. I'm really sorry because you've touched the topic. I'm right working on the heart of it. So, first of all, thank you so much because you brought a very important question and you've managed the debate very well. And again, I forgot to thank the organizers and the great work that everyone's doing here, and especially the country of Qatar for congratulating them, and for Turkey for being inclusive for those who are disadvantaged and including them in their education system. And I think we could really stand and take some notes from both countries of how inclusive they are and how, I don't like to use the word secular, but rather I like to use the word fair, by including those of different religion, of different identities within their scope of culture. And I think that is something really to take notes on, even the Western world, something, a place where I have grown up most of my life. I'm just going to go and mention 2 points. I'm going to finish off with the questions. I'll try to be as fast as I could. And I'm going to bring back to my right honorable lady in the front, who has been talking to me about identity and culture, so I hope you don't mind me bringing back that to you. The UK has used a program, and I'm going to come back and, I'm bringing back the topic to radicalization, and especially the word prevention. The UK decided to use the word, or the program, prevent. The word prevent was to stop radicalizing young people by joining radical groups. Me, I've worked as a teacher in schools in the UK, and I was at the heart of that program, and sometimes it made me wonder, were they preventing radicalization, or were they preventing young people from understanding their religion? Because we were taught to make sure that we police those programs. If any young student found to be carrying a Islamic book, which is fair enough, to understand your identity, to understand your culture, we right away need to be reporting them. So the state might not be the best person to take role in educating these people, which then brings us back to understanding our identity, to understanding our culture, which is most importantly, so when we walk into a school, we are aware of who we are aware of where we come from, i.e., if I was Kurdish, or i.e., if I was somebody from a certain part of Sudan who's being suppressed, if I know who I am, then therefore, and I know my history, and I know my identity, nobody will be able to bully me of who I am, rather than just my own religion. Just to a quick one, and that's what I said, when the state plays the role, Mr. Shoaib, of the education, all right, and preventing programs. So sometimes the state might not have the right program to do that, because the state is only there for a certain period of time, and they like to make other people happy and to make the voters happy, isn't it? So we are really, really not sure of whose role it is. Is it really the government, the family, the mosque? Who is it that's going to be educating me about my religion? And that question is to you. And just to conclude, I'm sorry I've taken some time, identity. When young people don't have enough supplement of their identity, that makes them vulnerable. And that makes them extremely susceptible for being recruited by those who might know better than them. So what has the Turkish government done in terms of youth work policies? How much youth work policies have been done in terms of group work to get those young people involved in the decision making? Thank you, and thanks a lot for your time. So I appreciate it.
Shoaib, would you like to first answer that, and then Rumaisa next?
Yes, sure. So your question, is the state best entity? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I can't compare Afghanistan to the UK. UK, first world developed country, Afghanistan developing with an ongoing conflict. So it's an issue of resources. It's an issue of capacity. We don't have any other credible entity to be able to do that. So perhaps ideally the state should facilitate thinking about how to prevent radicalization and promote tolerance, promote understanding, promote a culture of individual confidence, not necessarily blind obedience to communal traditions, right? But I understand your concern. I think that the challenge for us in my context, in our context, is when the state doesn't care. When the state said it's no longer my problem, that's when it gets really tricky. Because you don't have any entity in society thinking about these things or trying to prevent it. And then that opens the space for disruptors and negative groups with negative ideologies to just very openly, without any resistance, do as they please. And that's the kind of scenario where we are realistically more exposed to. So we're pushing the state to think about it, at least set up a framework where people are consciously trying to facilitate more and more.
Khansa, would you like to raise any comments on that, on the role of different actors?
So just to add to that, I think the problem is that we continue to keep this mindset which looks at the state in isolation from the people and the youth. And I think we need to let go of this mindset, because the problem is the state is made by the people, and the state at the end of the day ends up shaping the people who ends up leading it in the future. So I think maybe even if today the state isn't active enough, we need to make them realize their responsibility, because at the end of the day, we are their voter base. So if they're bad and they don't have policies that we like, or they don't have policies that aren't inclusive, we don't need to vote for them again, honestly. And we, I think, as an individual, we need to understand our responsibility, and of course that then translates into the collective. um, I'm not saying that state is the only actor that is responsible, but I think because of the power dynamics and just because of the role that they play, they do have a great responsibility, and they do have a mandate, or a certain legitimacy to enforce certain policies. So I think we can't excuse them or absolve them of their responsibility and their guilt, so to say. So the role that they have is something that we should shape. And if they aren't listening to our voices, then I think it's about time that we raise our voices higher.
Um, to be honest, I want to add so many things, make so many comments about what you have contributed to the topic. But I know we have a very limited time. So I'll just want to mention firstly the fact that I know in the West how extremism is seen, how people think that actually religion doesn't help preventing extremism. But I also followed the studies, academic studies that actually showed that done by the West, done by the way, that actually showed that lack of religious education leads to radicalization. So I think giving the right religious education is also really important. I know it's a huge topic, so I don't want to go into it. But to talk about the Turkish experience, to prevent extremism in the very early stages, we do set some activities in schools. We really care about club activities, students' clubs, even at the very early age. From democracy club to coding club, we have a very huge option in state schools where people go without paying anything, where people are giving materials without paying any price, and this is given to every children in Turkey. Because I do believe student clubs, they help people to discover themselves and also their position in the society. So it's really good to give their interest a try, and I really care about that. But to talk about the political experience of mine, we do have these visits to every part of Turkey in my party, AK Party. We go to youth branches. We are, as far as I know, we are one of the largest youth branches in the world. Our women youth branch is the second largest after China's women branch. So we have a really huge youth organization in my party. And when we go there, we talk to people who doesn't have like titles or not officials, young people, regarding the policies. So we get all those young people, even in the east part, the west part, it doesn't matter, even in villages, into policy making process. I do believe this is really important to not have this hierarchy between the positions and people. So I think this is really worth mentioning in terms of Turkish experience that I had in politics.
So I'd like to thank our panelists for their active contribution in this panel, and also thank you so much for your participation as well as attending this panel.
Thank you. Thank you to our distinguished speakers, esteemed attendees, and the youth present here today for engaging in these fundamental conversations on youth, education, climate change, identity, uprooting radicalism, and so much more. Most importantly, these conversations have shown us how education plays a pivotal role in empowering educated young people by fostering an inclusive environment to protect our planet's resources, reduce inequalities, combat terrorism, radicalism and terrorism, and elevate the community as a whole. We hope these conversations don't stop here. We urge you to give them life beyond the confines of this auditorium. And thank you for being here and for engaging and for all the important questions and important issues that we've discussed. Now I'll please ask the first row and the speakers to the stage for our group photo. As for our audience, we warmly invite you all to lunch with us on the first floor, up the steps over there. Thank you.